The punishment fire, 7, with her voice, a sturdy ice wall had formed around the flames in an indestructible and powerful posture. The continuous 12 ice shield had blocked the fire and the honorable spirit aside. Go! Huang Bei Yu had shouted at Zhong Yi. She then turned around and flew back. Now that the rock door was blocked by the honorable spirit, trying to get out from there was nearly impossible. They had to find another way out. The 12 ice shields could hold the honorable spirit back for a while, and it gave them some time to escape. The Ice One spirit bird and the purple flaming unicorn rushed left and right in the tumultuous sea of fire as the blue bats rushed over in groups, attacking them fiercely. Looking for death. Huang Bei Yu clenched her teeth. She had held both hands together quickly, and numerous ice arrows burst out of her hands, flying in all directions. The ice-cold arrow only stabbed the blue bat accurately and unmistakably. The extremely cold air of the ice spirit bird is extraordinary. How was the rank 10 blue bats able to take this? They had all died in one move. The powerful feeling of murderous aura surrounded the strange black cloak. It was chilling, cold-blooded, and deterrent. So that the blue bats in the distance were deterred. They were hesitant and dared not come forward to face this person under the black cloak. In the moment of hesitance, Huang Bei Yu and Zhong Yi had left behind a long distance from them. In the boundless sea of fire, the Ice One spirit bird and the purple flaming unicorn were like 2 meteor showers. Pang, 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 a dozen or so sounds of the rupture of the ice shield. It made the heart of people become like ice. A roar of roaring anger in the sea of fire. It had made the fierce blue bats retreat. In the super powerful pressure, the weaker beasts didn't dare to be around. Those who didn't have a strong strength were shocked by the ferocious roar and couldn't even fly. They had fallen directly into the sea of fire and burned to ashes. The huge body of the honorable spirit had appeared from the ice shield, and its huge eyes burned with flaming anger. These 2 humans had completely infuriated him. The huge body turned out from the sea of fire, and the dark scales had shined strangely in the sea of fire. His eyes stared firmly at the figure that had fled forward. It roared, and as though a dragon had just come out of the sea of fire, it had quickly caught up. There was no end that could be seen from this boundless sea of fire. The more someone ran inside, the more space they had noticed there was. In the end, there was no place where the eyes could see. The hot temperature led Huang Bei Yu, who was on the Ice One spirit bird's back, to feel unbearable. Her forehead had dripped down beads of sweat. It could be imagined that the situation for Zhong Yi was worse than her by many times. The sound of the rupture of the ice shield behind him was like the footsteps of the god of death. It was a little bit strange. Huang Bei Yu had never thought that the honorable spirit was so powerful that in just a short period of time, he had broken through the 12 ice shield. Oh, godly beasts are that strong. Feeling the pressure from the honorable spirit from the back, Huang Bei Yu couldn't help but to burst out a few swear words. Huang Bei Yu, to the left. In a critical moment, Yang had suddenly shouted. It was too late to judge. She was Yang's sealed vessel. So if she died, Yang would also die. Therefore, anyone could hurt her but not Yang. Crown Prince, this way. She had not even thought about it and immediately called the Crown Prince over and flew to the left. The sea of fire on the left, the flames of the waves turned higher. Several times, they were almost swept in by the waves. The punishment flame, 8. Thankfully the 2 spirit beasts were able to react quickly, each time they had resolved the dangerous situation. In the boundless sea of fire, there was no place that could be seen for hiding. This led Huang Bei Yu to be worried. Yang, are you deceiving me? Yang deeply exclaimed, Stop! Stop! Huang Bei Yu was stunned, and like a breeze, she had halted the ice spirit bird to a stop. She was a little confused. What happened? Zhong Yi had looked at her in confusion as well. In this life or death situation, why did she suddenly stopped? In her heart, she was worried too. She didn't know what Yang had planned. In this place where heaven and earth wasn't an option, Yang, this unknown spiritual beast, had become all of her hope. What had happened? Huang Bei Yu seemed calm on the surface but anxiously asked Yang in her heart. Yang held in a breath and explained, on a count to 3, you will immediately go down this sea of fire. What? Huang Bei Yu was shocked. Head down and jump into this sea of fire. Isn't that sending herself to death? However, Yang had not explained why, but instead he slowly began to count. 1. Crown Prince, later on, whatever I do, you will follow me too. Being helpless, Huang Bei Yu had told Zhonyi that. Zhonyi believed in her strength, therefore, he had not even been suspicious of Shi Tian's escape route. After he heard what Huang Bei Yu had said, he nodded his head. 2. Yang had counted really slowly. It had made Huang Bei Yu wanted to rage. The honorable spirit's angry roar from behind was getting closer and closer. The powerful pressure seemed to be like a tall mountain that had covered everything. Through the impatience and anxious waiting, Yang had really slowly said, 3, rush. Huang Bei Yu had not even thought about it when she drove the Ice Wand spirit bird immediately down. Zhonyi had frozen for a second. On his cold face, it was the first time it had revealed a surprised expression. This Shi Tian, what is she doing? Even though his head was filled with questions, but compared to the infuriated honorable spirit behind, jumping into the sea of fire wasn't a big deal. Therefore Zhonyi had also driven his purple flaming unicorn down. Almost at the same time, when they had rushed down, a high flame swelled up. The burning flame revealed a black hole. Huang Bei Yu's heart was filled with joy and she immediately put her 2 hands together, making a seal. A huge hail had smashed through and the flame surrounding the black hole was knocked out. The hole, which was just big enough for the Ice Wand spirit bird to fly in sideways. Since the purple flaming unicorn had no wings, it was easier for it to follow in. Unlike the scorching sea of fire, as soon as they entered the cave, there were drips of water that fell down on their head. The cold water dropped on their cheeks, which were completely different from the hot heat waves outside. The surrounding was dark and nothing could be seen. If it wasn't because of the light on the Ice Wand spirit bird and the purple flaming unicorn, they wouldn't be able to see the scene clearly in the hole. The place that they had flown was a relatively narrow cliff with black and smooth stoned walls erected on both sides, thick with moss. The cold water oozed from the walls constantly. No matter whether they looked up or down, there was no end to be seen. The cold environment, and the sea of flames rolling outside, it is hard to imagine that the two were so close together. The punishment flame, 9, about 10 minutes later, the 2 sides of the cliff slowly opened and slowly, in front of their eyes was a large open black space. However, there was nothing in here except for black water below. There was no clue as to where the water had come from. The dark space wasn't as bright as the sea of fire. With the fire from the purple flaming unicorn, only the surrounding 10 meters or so could be seen clearly. Huang Bei Yu listened to the sound of the gurgling water for a while before she stated, "We can leave through the water. As long as there's a direction in the water flow, there should be an exit where the water flowed out. These waters can't possibly be stagnant water." When they were at the edge of the cliff, a rock had fallen down. Huang Bei Yu jumped down and stared at the black water. There was no clue as to whether or not there were fierce spirit beasts within the water. However, no matter how fierce the spirit beasts were, they wouldn't be scared. The 2 9-star summoners, along with 2 super spiritual beasts, could be considered as a very powerful team. In the Sea of Fire, there was the Honorable Spirit. Therefore in this area, there shouldn't be any spirit beasts. With no spirit beasts, they felt slightly more at ease. Zhonyi had also walked to her side and glanced at the water. He scrunched his eyebrows and exclaimed, "We have no idea how wide this area of water is or how deep. If we go under, there is no clue to when we would be outside. If this body of water was as wide and boundless like the Sea of Fire, they would probably drown in here first before they made it outside. This is nothing to be worried about. I have a solution." Huang Bei Yu replied with ease. The Sea of Fire could have trapped her, but this body of water. Here was the chance to try out how powerful the weight avoidance pearl was. She took out the water pearl from her space ring. The light purple water pearl was extremely beautiful and transparent at the edge of the water. Zhonyi turned around and was shocked. He stated, "Water pearl. Good eyesight, Crown Prince." Huang Bei Yu gave him a thumbs up and complimented him. "Looks like this water avoidance pearl is a treasure." Zhonyi looked at her and the corner of his lip seemed cold. He said nothing, but in his heart, There was the feeling of the sun after the rain. In connection with the theft of the Angua Gong Fu and this water pearl, what was there not to be understood? This Shi Tian, such a person who likes to fool around. His face seemed cold as ever, as though a millennium iceberg. However, the corners of his lips were curled up into a faint smile. Huang Bei, you had never thought that the misunderstanding was cleared so quickly. She didn't even need to say a sentence and he had completely understood her. This type of feeling was really good. She felt relieved after this chain in her heart was removed. Let's follow the direction of the water flow. There should be an exit. Huang Bei Yu explained calmly, as though she had no idea what just happened. Zhong Yi's heart felt warm. This cold Shi Tian, she most likely knew already that he didn't trust her in his heart. However, at this time he was grateful that she didn't make him a fool out of himself or asked for an explanation. The two people had placed their spirit beasts away. Huang Bei Yu tossed the water pearl into the water. In a split second, the purple light from the water pearl had shined brilliantly. Wherever the light was, the water surface was turned over and moved to two sides. In the purple light, it formed a small waterless space. It was like a glass room where 4 or 5 people was able to walk in. Huang Bei Yu raised her eyebrows slightly. It was her first time she saw such a magical treasure. The punishment flame, 10, let's go. She wanted to try what it was like to walk without carrying oxygen, instead walking on water. Therefore, she had first stepped into the water. As soon as she touched the ice-cold water, she couldn't help but gasp. It was freezing, as expected. This bone-chilling coldness was almost as bad as the extreme coldness of the Ice-Luan spirit bird. She let out a sneeze and suddenly a small ripple in the water swelled up. Then she felt as though her ankle was bitten by something. Because the water was too arctic, that feeling she got was very weak. She felt like she was poked by a needle. However, when she tried to move, she found out there was no strength in her body. There's a snake. Zhong Yi pulled her up. A red snake that was the size of a finger was wrapped around the foot of Huang Bei Yu. Zhong Yi wanted to brush the red snake off, but the back of his hand was swept away by the tail of the snake. With a splash, the red snake had disappeared in an instant into the black water. There was no sign of the snake anywhere. It's the other sky-swallowing red snake. There was a slight tremble in Zhong Yi's voice that people wouldn't normally pick up. He took the initiative and pulled up Huang Bei Yu's ankle. Under the cloak, what became visible to his eyes were a pair of small girl's feet which wore pink embroidered shoes. He was slightly stunned, and as soon as she took off her shoes, a small venomous tooth print appeared on her snow-white-like feet. Huang Bei Yu let out a cold gasp. That wound didn't hurt, but as the poison spread, it felt harder to breathe. There was no strength in her body, so she grabbed onto Zhong Yi's arm helplessly. Quick, go outside. Go outside to find a doctor. She started to feel regret for learning about refining. Had she refined some pills that cured poison and brought it along with her, this type of accident wouldn't have happened. The poison of the sky-swallowing red snake belongs to the strongest fire attribute type of poison. There is no cure to it. Even though he had said this, Zhong Yi quickly grabbed a small bottle out of his space ring. From the bottle, he poured out a small green oily pill and delivered it to her. Eat this first. It couldn't cure the poison, but at least it can protect her heart pulse and prevent it from damage. Huang Bei Yu nodded her head. She weakly raised her hand and placed the pill into her mouth. In the next second, she frantically squealed. What are you doing? He grabbed her feet and lowered his head, covering the wound that was bitten by the sky-swallowing red snake with his mouth. He sucked the poisonous blood out little by little. He said nothing in this whole process. The beautiful eyebrows were scrunched together as though like a mountain filled with fogs. Huang Bei Yu looked at him stunned. Half a second later, she reached out and gave his shoulder a few gentle pats. Thank you. A mouthful of poisonous blood was spat out. Zhong Yi raised his head and wiped off the blood by the corner of his lips. He coldly explained, Father Emperor wants to recruit you. If you died, Father Emperor will be upset. Huang Bei Yu sighed. Couldn't this cold young man have said that he also wanted to recruit her? The longer they stayed here, the less safe Huang Bei Yu felt. They had fled here, but the honorable spirit wouldn't have let them go. He definitely would have caught up. It's just a matter of time right now. Therefore, the sooner they left here, the better. An extra second spent here meant extra danger. After Zhongyi had bandaged her wound, Huang Beiyu immediately announced, "Let's quickly leave here." Zhongyi nodded his head and helped her up. When he did so, he saw her pair of snow-white-like feet. Thus, he was sure she was genuinely a young girl. The punishment flame, 11, because of a male's self-esteem, Zhongyi originally wanted to carry her and leave. However, once he thought about her powerful status as Shi Tian, he thought that would damage her pride. Therefore, he couldn't ask. When they walked into the aperture, the purple light slowly closed to form a barrier which blocked the water. They had walked into it as though walking on flat surface. The purple light glowed and allowed them to see a large range inside the black water. The bottom of the water broke the wall and fell to the ground. This should have been a small city which had sunk to the bottom. At the bottom of the water, this city most likely had been buried for thousands of years. Besides these buildings, there were human bones everywhere and their postures were all different. It seemed like this city had suddenly sunk to the bottom. Just like the mysterious Atlantis. "This is the city of the unyielding." Zhongyi suddenly lowly answered. Huang Beiyu asked confused, "What is city of the unyielding?" Zhongyi guessed in his heart that she wasn't from Kart mainland, that's why she had no understanding of Nanyi country's history. He patiently explained to her. When Nanyi country had just started, it had encountered strong ethnic groups. They defended their city and refused to give in. This city, which was surrounded for 1 year and was not captured, had disappeared without a single trace one night. The great ancestor admired the unyielding people's spirit and thus built Lin Huai City on this city. So that was what happened. These things, Huang Bei you seemed to have no idea about before. A city wouldn't miraculously have vanished. Now that she had seen the broken city at the bottom of the water, she was almost definitely certain that the reason the city had vanished in one right was due to an earthquake. That means that Lin Huai City was built on top of where an earthquake most likely would occur. The Sea of Fire under the 7th tower was probably a huge volcano. The setting here was peculiar and the lava activity was frequent. Lin Huai City had lived in peace for a long time, but what if one day the volcano erupted? Will Lin Huai City become the next city of the unyielding? This city contained all of Huang Beiyu's memories. She can't watch it disappeared and not do anything. Crown Prince, Huang Beiyu wanted to say something, but the ground under her trembled. Her body was still weak due to the poison, so she almost fell due to the lack of balance. The two people were stunned for a while. After that tremble, there was no movement for a long time. Then after a dozen seconds, the bottom of the water began to shake and the water that was shaken began to create huge waves. They hid in the water pearl and were shook back and forth. The honorable spirit had caught up. "Let's leave quickly." Huang Beiyu was shocked. There was snake poison inside her body, and if she only relied on Zhongyi, they aren't a match against the honorable spirit. Their only choice was to escape and find the exit. Escape out. She limped while Zhongyi helped her escape. They hadn't run for a couple of steps when the ground beneath their feet had split. A huge crack had appeared and they almost fell into it. From the deep pit, red light had spread up. The freezing water slowly became warm. The magma had come out. Huang Beiyu was shocked. If the water became boiled, they would become dumplings. The punishment flame, 12, the waves kept on shaking. With the pearl, they weren't afraid of the shaking. However, the water was in chaos, which meant that the direction of the water flow couldn't be found. In Huang Beiyu's heart, she secretly was worried. Because she was poisoned, it had influenced her memory. She could only rely on parts of her memories to keep moving. The nearby water had flowed rapidly, all heading towards one place. Huang Beiyu revealed a smile. It should be nearby. She had just finished her statement when the water behind her turned into chaos. Right after that, the raging waves were picked up and a tight pressure appeared behind them. The huge black tail of the dragon had swept by, causing all the building to collapse under, and the water was swept out. The shining cold light of the scales was like sharp spikes. Anything that was touched by it was cut into pieces and shattered. You guys had startled my nap. How can I let you guys leave so easily? The Honorable Spirit's voice floated around the water. The tail swept around wildly in the water, and the aperture formed by the water pearl was gradually weakened by the strong pressure. Obviously, under the pressure of the godly beast, the treasure couldn't withstand it anymore. The water flow was disturbed, which formed a large vortex. The huge tail swooped over and knocked against the water pearl. The purple aperture was instantly dispersed and water flowed in from all directions. Be careful. Zhongyi's voice had just sounded out before it was drowned out by the rapid waves. Huang Bei Yu made a noise before she was immediately swallowed by the current. Oh no. Face to face with the Honorable Spirit, and she had just got poisoned by the snake. Her strength had weakened down to 2 or 3/10 of her original strength. Was she bound to be unlucky this time? The water rushed too quickly and nothing could be seen clearly in front of the wet cloak. She had no idea where Zhongyi was flushed to. In the water, the strength of the purple flaming unicorn and the Ice-Swan spirit bird couldn't be displayed to the fullest. If they were summoned, they would actually hold them back instead of benefiting them. Therefore, Huang Bei Yu grasped the black jade tightly and called for Yang in her heart. Yang, don't pretend to be dead. If she wasn't poisoned and her body wasn't weakened, then she wouldn't be in such a difficult situation right now. Yang depressingly replied, what joke are you playing at? I had been sealed by the Blackwater Prison's 49 restrictions. I could only reluctantly come out and deal with characters like Sima Gui Yang. I would be asking for death if I have to deal with that old monster. You. Huang Bei Yu was so angry that she also spat blood out. Not good, that old monster seems to be heading towards you. Yang's voice slightly changed. Huang Bei Yu was shocked. He was coming for her. While she thought about it, she rushed to take off the cloak that bothered her. She looked up and was almost scared to death. All she saw was that huge black tail that swept over and smashed everything out of his way. It headed straight towards her. She immediately took out the ice feathers from her hand and used all her remaining power to sweep it towards the huge tail. A huge ice blade headed towards Honorable Spirit's dark tail. The power of the ice blade wasn't as strong as the ice shield, but the strength was more. With her strength, a total of 24 ice blades could be formed. In the eyes of the Honorable Spirit, it was like a child's game of playing house. The human who had gotten snake poison and didn't have enough strength, what harm could she do against him? The huge tail stayed and didn't move out of the way. It directly collided with the 24 ice blade. The punishment flame, 13. Suddenly the ice slags had broke into pieces everywhere. The strong force from the water shouldn't be underestimated. Those broken ice slags were counter-attacked upon. The power of it was very strong. Huang Bei Yu held the ice feather and waved it in the water and promptly blocked it. However, after such a round, the body that was already poisoned became weaker and there wasn't much strength left. Waves of dizziness hit her as she attempted to open her eyes in order to see the situation clearly. It was uneasy to move around in the water. Plus there wasn't enough oxygen. Not to mention the uncomfortable feeling. Moreover, she still needed her full strength to go against the huge black dragon. The flaming red hair floated out of the cloak. It floated like the way a seaweed would in water. Zhongyi, who was behind, saw that she didn't have enough strength, so he swam over despite it was the opposite direction of the water flow. The huge eyes of the dragon had swept over and its tail had slammed down. The waves had moved in the opposite direction and formed a vortex. Zhongyi, who had just gotten a few steps closer, was immediately swept into the whirlpool. Then the Honorable Spirit had rolled Huang Bei Yu up by its tail and suddenly turned around. He forcibly dragged her away. Zhongyi, who was in the whirlpool, wasn't willing to let it end like this. He immediately summoned the purple flaming unicorn and ordered in his heart, "Save her." The purple flaming unicorn raised his eyes and looked at the Honorable Spirit, who moved freely in the water. That is the real godly beast. Not to mention that they were in the water, so their strength had decreased in half. Even on land and in a normal battle, they wouldn't be the match against the Honorable Spirit. Zhongyi, the exit is nearby. If you don't leave now, you will also die. Purple flaming unicorn calmly stated. Zhongyi clenched his teeth and replied, "Save her." The summoner and the spirit beast's lives are intertwined with each other. If you die, I will die too. Save her. The purple flaming unicorn didn't reply. Instead it roared, and the body in the water had rapidly multiplied many times. Then it opened its mouth and brought Zhongyi in. He followed the direction of the water flow and left. Huang Beiyu was in a daze, and the snake poison had started to react in her body. Adding on to the loss of oxygen in the water, her face became green. There was no strength left, so she leaned on the honorable spirit's tail. The cold and sharp scales had cut against her arm. There was a bubble in her mouth, which obviously meant that the last oxygen was pumped away from the lungs. Master, the Ice Luan spirit bird hurriedly cried out. Please summon me out. I can protect you. Huang Beiyu shook her head. Thank goodness she didn't needed to open her mouth to talk. No, that old monster seemed to have decided not to kill me for now. If you come out, it will anger him. Her life was hanging on a line and her brain was in chaos after being poisoned, yet she could still be this calm, which led the Ice Luan spirit bird to admire her. He didn't know that when Huang Beiyu was in the modern times, she had gone through fire and water. Not only that, she had experienced many dangerous things. All these experiences had slowly accumulated over time. The ability to remain calm in dangerous situations was also slowly practiced. Although she had no clue why the honorable spirit had spent that much effort to capture her but not kill her. However, as long as she isn't dead, she, Huang Beiyu, always had the ability to turn the situation back around. Hey, well, you are calm. Yang slowly exclaimed. You had also seen the honorable spirit's punishment flame. If he throws you into the punishment flame, even though your life is saved, but that kind of torture, Huang Beiyu also shuddered. The punishment flame. The punishment flame won't harm people's lives. The punishment flame, 14. The punishment flame wouldn't harm one's life, but that sinister flame would burn deeply, straight at the soul. There was a sort of explanation in the Lingyang College. The punishment flame was the type of flame that burned everything evil in one's soul off. Therefore it was named punishment. Punishment flame, who is scared of that? Huang Beiyu confidently humphed in her heart. The longer the time had passed, the more the poison had spread. The feeling of lack of oxygen was more obvious. Huang Beiyu slowly closed her eyes and slipped into unconsciousness. In her blurry conscious, heaven and earth had turned upside down. There was a lack of sunlight and moonlight. The stars had vanished. A bright red huge snake crawled out from the edge of heaven. It opened its huge bloody mouth and swallowed the entire sky. The sky swallowing red snake. Huang Beiyu thought of the tiny red snake that bit her. It was only about the size of her finger, but after it had grown into an adult, it's that huge. After the sky-swallowing red snake had swallowed the sky, its huge body slowly crawled over to Huang Beiyu. Its red eyes glared at her. Huang Beiyu stood proudly. The wind had come out of nowhere and blew on the body of the black cloak she had worn. She coldly stared at the mountain like sky-swallowing red snake. The clear and cold tone slowly spat out from her red lips. The revenge against your offsprings who had bitten me, in the future that will be returned 10 times harder. The huge eyes of the sky-swallowing red snake had turned and sneered. Girl, you are too arrogant. It is you who had hurt my offspring first. Had he not provoked me first, would I be disdained enough to even make a move? At the stairs of the 7th tower, that baby sky-swallowing red snake tried to attack her and Zhongyi, but it was stopped by Zhongyi. In the end, she was the one that gave the baby snake the last blow and chopped off its head. The sky-swallowing red snake jeered. Okay, then I will wait for the day you seek me for revenge. After he had finished, the bright red sky-swallowing red snake had turned around and slowly left. Huang Beiyu stared at the red back and felt that her head was in pain. Sigh. She suddenly opened her eyes. The searing flame was too harsh for her eyes. She had almost immediately closed her eyes. After a couple seconds, she had opened her eyes slowly again. This was a huge empty stone room. The surrounding were black stone walls. The wall was burned deep red by the flame. Under the stone wall, there was only a wide pond. However, the pond was not covered with water, instead, it was raging flame. She was now trapped on a stone slate in the middle of the fire, and the slate moved around the fire, as though the slate would have sunk into the flames at any moment. What was weird was that the slate was burned by the fire, yet the slate still felt cool. The flame outside, although it was strong, not even a little spark splashed inside. This was probably the place where the Honorable Spirit had lived, but where is the Honorable Spirit? With his huge body, where could he have hidden? While she thought about it, suddenly a red stone wall opened into two sides. A simple boat slowly rowed in. On the boat, there was a young man who wore a black robe and had a slender figure. His eyebrows were detailed like people who came out of paintings. He had the looks that the whole country would have admired, but that indifference made him less popular. The thin lips that were pursed made him seem unreasonable. The man stood on the boat and his narrow eyes took a look at Huang Beiyu. He seemed to be high on the top. The punishment flame, 15, Huang Beiyu was stunned. Where did this person pop out from? In this purgatory sea of fire, someone had survived. Could he happen to be the secluded high-ranked master who had a contract with the Honorable Spirit? The ability to have owned a godly beast as a summoning beast, and it's the type of godly beast like Honorable Spirit, it would make many envious. The stone slate wobbled around in the sea of fire. She was frightened that if she stood up, the slate wouldn't be balanced. If she fell, that would make her lose face. Therefore, she had remained seated. A pair of eyes raised up and stared at the man. "What is your name?" The man coldly spoke. That voice seemed as though it was from a cold spring that was frozen for thousands of years, icy and distinct. Huang Beiyu hugged her hands and sat cross-legged. After she had heard the question, she faintly raised her eyebrows and replied, "You didn't even tell me what your name is." "Why should I tell you?" Just as she had finished, she hadn't seen how he moved so quickly when her face was whipped by a thick and almost invisible black whip. The strength of the whip was strong, but it didn't break the skin completely. It had only left a thin red blood mark on her face while her whole body had flown out due to the force. The stone slate wasn't huge, so she almost fell into the sea of fire. She held onto the stone slate as though it was her last hope. She raised her head and glared at him. She clenched her teeth and sneered, "You're taking advantage of me because I was poisoned and can't fight against you, right?" She hadn't been beaten by someone for so many years. When that whip was taken out, she didn't even have the ability to counterattack. Being poisoned did cause a decrease in strength. However, she must admit that man's strength was above hers. "Even if you weren't poisoned, I could still beat you until you can't fight back," the man coldly exclaimed, and his eyes flashed over cold light. It was not compatible with the boundless sea of fire. Huang Beiyu's anger was immediately triggered. How could she let someone trampled over her strong sense of self-esteem? She wiped off the blood on her face and she quickly stood up on the slate. On the wobbly slate, she stood tall and proud. In her hands appeared the ice feathers. Her clear eyes revealed a murderous look. The man coldly stared at the ice feathers in her hand. His lips curled up into a slight look of mockery. Ice prison, open. In the endless sea of fire, the huge ice prison appeared from all directions and trapped the black-cloaked man along with the boat inside. Huang Beiyu faintly panted. Her forehead had appeared a thin layer of sweat. The body that was already weak, but it became weaker due to the poison. The ice feathers in her hand slowly became huger and transformed into a giant snow-white battle sword. She raised the sword with both hands and yelled, "Go die." Once the battle sword chopped down the prison, the ice prison would immediately be split into pieces. People that were trapped in there would also be broken into numerous pieces. Ice prison was a higher-level ice attribute skill. The target can immediately be frozen and cause them to lose their battle strength. Besides that, they would be trapped in the Arctic ice forever, never able to escape. Prison might leave a small chance for the living. But once it was smashed into pieces, then that person is bound to die. But, her eyebrows slightly furrowed. That person obviously wasn't that easy to be dealt with. There were only broken pieces of the boat in the split-up ice prison, but not pieces of the man. You had already used the skill, ice prison. However, there is no more vitality in your body. The strength of the ice prison is as weak as a child. The clear and cold voice sounded from behind. Huang Beiyu's back was slightly stiff. She slowly turned her head over. The punishment flame, 16, she could only to see his black cloak had floated over. He slowly walked over from the sea of fire. She licked her dry lips and sneered, "Once I regain my strength, it wouldn't be as easy as you say so." He walked closer and arrogantly stared at her. "Want a rematch?" "I'm not battling." It's not like she's bored and had nothing to do. She knew she couldn't fight against him, so obviously, she's not going to rematch. "Why did you tell the honorable spirit to capture me here?" His eyebrows slightly furrowed. He calmly stated, "Worship me as your master." Huang Beiyu shockingly looked at him. She was a little surprised and thought it was funny. Her expression contained deep mockery. "You are dreaming?" "Pa." His fingertips had moved and the black whip had thrashed over. She had suffered one time. How could Huang Beiyu suffer the second time? She flexibly dodged over. She had just let out a sigh when the second black whip had thrashed over from the opposite direction. The position was not off or anything and it landed on her face. Huang Beiyu was infuriated in an instant. "You want to hit me? Don't hit me on my face. Don't go overboard." Once she finished, another whip came. It had whipped on her face again. This was definitely the greatest shame of her life. She, Huang Beiyu, would rather have a life and death battle than continue to be shamed. "Ice." She deeply hollered and summoned the Ice Swan spirit bird. The claws of the ice bird caught on her shoulders, like the huge wings on the back. In her hand, she held the snow-white battle sword. With wings on her back, she seemed like a god of death and threw herself at the man. Her actions were quick, agile, fierce, and added with wings, it was as though she had gained double the power. The battle sword quickly slashed at his body and he continuously backed up and ducked. Huang Beiyu suddenly went up and suddenly down. Suddenly in the front and suddenly in the back. The actions were so quick that it led people to be dazzled. The battle of the sword had begun. Each time it was aimed towards his weakness and the power was powerful. Her actions were swift and so was he. The two people had fought against each other for over 100 moves. Huang Beiyu was slightly at the disadvantage. Her face was whipped hard by his whip. Usually a person like her wasn't so self-centered, but in the end, she was still a girl. Plus she had a strong sense of self-esteem. The fire in her heart after being whipped so many times on her face. She was the type of person who became stronger when she encountered a powerful person. The more powerful the opponent was, the more intense her belligerent heart became. Though, it depended on what type of powerful person she had encountered. This man's rank was obviously not just higher by 1 or 2 ranks. His strength had probably reached the rank of legendary summoners. Strong, abnormal. Even though the summoned beast wasn't summoned, it had led Huang Beiyu, who had become one with her beast, suffered so much. He seemed to be tired of this entangled fighting style, so his black whip had suddenly rolled up and curled around Huang Beiyu's waist. The whip then harshly threw her on the slate. With such great strength, it could be seen that this man had no habit of showing mercy to a woman. Huang Beiyu was thrown so harshly that her 5 viscera and 6 bowels had almost spat out. The snake poison added onto the strong blow. Her chest suddenly felt warm. She opened her mouth and a mouthful of black blood was spat out. The black-cloaked man's eyes were slightly squinted. His eyes landed on the pool of black blood for a second before he asked, "Want to worship me as your master?" "No." Huang Beiyu hadn't even thought about it before she immediately replied, "I am in a very bad mood. All I want to do is to defeat you. Even if I die, I won't worship you." "Humph." He unhappily sneered. He softly waved his sleeves and a ball of flame rushed towards Huang Beiyu. The punishment flame, 17, punishment flame. Yang, who was in her body, had shockingly announced. Huang Beiyu was also stunned. Afterwards, the flame had rapidly burned up her body. The first to let out a blood-curdling scream was Yang. He is the evilest existence in her body, sealed in the Blackwater prison. The punishment flame burned the soul. So there was no way in which Yang, who was sealed in her body, would be able to escape. The eviler someone was, the worse the torment would be. Huang Bei, you only felt that the burning flame burned from the deepest part of her body, and then slowly, her 5 viscera and 6 bowels were immediately burned to ashes. There was something in her body that trembled. She heard the screams of her soul. In the flame, she had spat out a couple mouthful of black blood. Then her whole body had rolled back and forth on the slate. Her expression was malevolent and scary, like the last struggles before death. Are you going to worship me as your master? The black-cloaked man stood by her side and coldly stared at her in pain. Yet he felt nothing. He had just coldly inquired. Huang Bei Yu's whole body shook. She bit her lip as blood had slowly oozed out of her eyes, mouth, nose, and ears. She widened her eyes, which was filled with blood, and glared at him. Her throat had let out a heartbreaking scream. No, Huang Bei Yu had only one master. That was the master who had taught and raised her from childhood. Her most respected and loved master. No one could replace him. His eyebrows had already revealed an obvious displeasure. This fire would burn for an hour. If you change your mind, I will take it back. If not, no. Came a determined voice. Even if she had to die, her decision would never be changed. Such a stubborn girl. Then you can slowly be tormented. After he had finished, he didn't even look at her and walked out from the stone walls. He left her behind to be tortured. Once he had come out from the stone walls, the black-cloaked man had suddenly changed into a giant black dragon who traveled freely in the sea of fire. Not all the godly beasts could transform into human figures. No matter how strong the normal godly beasts were, they were stuck in the body of beasts. Only the strongest of the super godly beasts were able to escape from the body of beasts and transformed into humans. The honorable spirit's huge body freely moved around in the sea of fire. After a couple of moments, he went inside another stone wall. The huge body moved along the uneven wall and climbed up to the highest place. This place seemed as though it was a cave. The walls weren't smoothness inside. There were only sharp rocks everywhere. The top of the cave was very high and there seemed to be a secret hidden in it. Honorable Spirit's huge eyes were focused on the dark stone stage in the front. On it, it looked as though there was a memorial tablet. He stared at it for a couple seconds before he said, "Your descendant had finally come." After he finished this statement, he was lost in his thoughts and was quiet. When the Honorable Spirit had gazed towards the memorial tablet, his eyes contained a lot of past memories. The times when they went up to heaven, down to earth and picked up the moon, would never return. Along with the burial of the man under the Lurse, the glorious years of splendid times were also buried. After an hour, the Honorable Spirit headed back towards the stone room. The punishment flame was extinguished and the girl on the slate had laid there with her last breath. On her pale face, it contained whip marks everywhere as well as bloody inks. The skin under the bloody stain wasn't green and purple as it was when poisoned. Instead, it had slowly returned back to the color of normal people's skin tone. He pulled up her feet and black blood had oozed out of the surrounding wounds formed by the bite of sky-swallowing red snake. The punishment flame, 18, the snow-white feet had turned into a deep red color. These were all the poisonous toxin forced out of her body. In this world, there was no cure for the poison of the sky-swallowing red snake. If it wasn't forced out, it was slowly moved from her body into the 5 viscera and 6 bowels. These internal organs would be eaten and destroyed slowly. Now that the poison was cured, then her life would not be in danger. Huang Bei Yu had slipped into unconsciousness. She didn't even have a bit of awareness at all. The same goes for Yang, who had been burned by the punishment flame. He had retreated back to the deepest part of the black water prison along with his last breath. You will eventually worship me as your master. The Honorable Spirit's clear and cold voice slowly rang. Otherwise, you will never realize the rule of the Black Jade. Yang's ears slightly moved as though he had heard some key information. He hoped that the Honorable Spirit would have kept going on, but he said nothing else. He carried the unconscious Huang Bei Yu and stepped onto the boat that slowly rowed itself over. In the fierce sea of fire, a boat as though a drop in the ocean, slowly drifted in the distance. Princess Zhong's Prefecture. Flowing Clouds Pavilion. Huang Bei Yu had not returned and Dong Ling couldn't fall asleep. She had waited in her room for almost half the night. It was almost daytime, yet there was still no movement outside. The young miss couldn't possibly be in trouble. Dong Ling started to secretly worry. In the past, young miss had never returned this late. She walked back and forth in her room. She felt uneasy. Suddenly she heard a noise in the room. She hurriedly ran into the room to check it out. "Young miss, you're back." There was an extra silhouette on the bed who had quietly slept. Dong Ling let out a sigh. So she had already returned. It's probably because she was too tired, so she had slept soon. She walked over and wanted to pull the covers up for young miss. However, she had suddenly seen young miss's face. At that moment, she let out a sudden gasp. "Young miss, young miss." Dong Ling raised one hand over and shook her. While she did so, she had lowly called her. At this time, she knew better than to scream out loud. If it led other people here, then the situation will be even worse. She had nearly cried as Huang Beiyu had mumbled and slowly opened her eyes. Her eyebrows continuously jumped. Obviously, the pain from the punishment flame had not completely disappeared. Young miss, what had actually happened? Once she saw that young miss had awakened, Dong Ling sighed. Right after her sigh, she had quietly cried. Huang Beiyu was stunned and she touched her face. She reluctantly stated, "It's not a big deal. Don't cry. Help me up." Dong Ling hurriedly used both her hands and helped her up. She placed a pillow behind Huang Beiyu and let her lean on it. "Give me the mirror." Dong Ling hesitated for a moment. Huang Beiyu softly exclaimed, "It's fine. No matter how ugly it is, I can accept it." She was never the person who relied on her face to get somewhere. However, as a girl, she knew that her face was ruined. She wanted to see how her face had turned out to be. Dong Ling took the mirror from the makeup table and carefully passed it over to her. She softly stated, "Young miss, here." Huang Beiyu took the mirror over and glanced at it. At that moment, she bitterly smiled. That bastard, how dare he damaged her face this much? She must seek revenge. Even if her strength couldn't be compared to his right now, she didn't believe that her strength will never be as good as his. The punishment flame, 19, her face was ruined, yet she wasn't too upset about it. It's just that she needed the status of Princess Beiyu in the future to do a lot of things. Thus, she needed her face to return to normal as soon as possible. "Young miss, why did it turn out to be like this? Who made you like this?" Dong Ling thought that was unbelievable. The young miss today have the strength of 9-star summoner. What type of person could have harmed her to this point? "These are small wounds." Dong Ling, who had brought me back before? Dong Ling shook her head. "I didn't see either. I just heard noises, so I came in and looked, and young miss was already on the bed." Huang Beiyu nodded her head. Her eyes slightly squinted. Why had that man brought her back? Thinking about his motives, she had no clue as to why he had done this. Even now, she had no idea who he was. Why did he wanted her to worship him as master? Once she thought about these questions, it gave her a headache. Before she was burned by the punishment flame, her body was at its weakest point. She thought about that Xue Che who was burned for only a little while and still hadn't woke up yet. Her endurance for pain could be considered very strong. Huang Beiyu took out the jadeite liquid that the Crown Prince Zhongyi had gave to her last time. She let Dong Ling put it on her wounds. The effect of this ointment was very powerful. Last time Dong Ling's numerous bloody whip marks on her body were gone without a trace due to the ointment. While Dong Ling had wiped the ointment on, Huang Beiyu checked the snake poison in her body but surprisingly found out that the toxins had all vanished. Strange, wasn't the poison of sky swallowing red snake supposed to be powerful? If it's so powerful, how did it disappeared? It didn't disappeared by itself. It was due to the punishment flame that the toxins were forced out of the body. Yang had woken up at some time and replied with his last breath. Huang Beiyu knew what the punishment flame was like. With a determined heart like hers, even she had thought about suicide to end this pain while she is in the punishment flame. It could be imagined that Yang wasn't any better off. Huang Beiyu thought seriously about it for a while before she answered in her heart. "So, he had actually helped me?" Yang deeply said, "From what I think, he wanted to help you force the toxins out from the start. Punishment flame burned anything that wasn't clean. Even the evil in souls could be destroyed. The sky-swallowing red snake has an overbearing poison. There is no antidote in this world. However, once burned by the punishment flame, the toxins would be forced out of the body. Plus, the body that had been burned by the punishment flame would be immune to numerous poisons." Huang Beiyu's eyes became bright. This was a pretty good gain. She suddenly thought of something. She hurriedly asked, "Then all these years the poison that concubine Shui had planted on me would all be gone?" "That's right. That's good." This was probably the best reward for barging into the 7th tower. In the past, she was confused. How should she use medicine to cure Huang Beiyu's body, which was soaked in poison all year round? However, she had not really studied the secret of the refining pharmacists, so this matter was delayed. Who knew that after this accident was a blessing in disguise? "Huang Beiyu, how come you won't worship him as your master?" Yang was puzzled. The strength of the black-cloaked man was obviously above hers. Yet this girl rather died than to worship him as her master. "I don't like to be threatened," Huang Beiyu stated calmly. The personality of her had always been like this. She would rather harm herself than to let someone else benefit. The method of refining pills. 1. If he wanted to let her worship him as her master, then he needed to let her completely admire him from her heart. Otherwise, there is nothing to say. Yang was silent for a moment before he suddenly exclaimed, "But, I think that he seems to know about the secret of the black jade." Huang Beiyu was shocked. She hurriedly asked, "How do you know?" Yang restated what he had heard in the Sea of Fire again to Huang Beiyu. Huang Beiyu bit her bottom lip and her face seemed to be indefinite. She had thought about it before that the honorable spirit under the Sea of Fire had some connections with Huang Beiyu. But she had never thought that it was tied in with the beast without boundaries also. Yang lowly replied, "Do you want to consider it?" "I didn't really consider it. I only have one master. I don't want to worship anyone else. Plus I really don't like him. There was no way I would be able to convince my heart to be his disciple." After Yang had heard this, he had said nothing. He slowly returned back to the darkness to recover from his wounds. The wounds were almost all coated with ointment. These wounds were deep and the man had handled the strength cleverly. "Dongling, when the day is bright, go find out what the crown prince is doing." After the separation in the water, he most likely had escaped. However, based on his personality, after he escaped, he most likely gathered people to come to rescue her. The 7th tower was the honorable spirit's place. He would probably suffer more if he went there. Therefore, she wanted to know what he had been doing. Then, she would notify him that she had also escaped. Dongling nodded her head. She saw that the sky was almost lit, so she had let Huang Beiyu rested. She went out and inquired about the crown prince's situation. Huang Beiyu was actually really tired, so once her head met the pillow, she had fallen into a deep sleep. She had no idea how long she had slept, but she faintly heard the sound of someone moving around. She thought that Dongling had returned and wanted to let Dongling pour a cup of water for her. Her throat was so dry. However, due to her naturally born awareness, she had rolled her body over and sat up in an instant. She turned around and only saw a handsome and enchanting face which smiled at her. "You." Her voice was hoarse, but it was still cold and murderous. The security of Princess Zhong's prefecture wasn't that strict and the location of Flowing Cloud's pavilion was remote. Therefore, it wasn't unusual that someone had barged in. However, they dared to barge into the place where she slept. Did they dislike their life? Feng Lianyi slightly smiled and turned around to pour a warm cup of tea. He delivered it over to her. Huang Beiyu had taken it from him and sipped it all in one go. She was really thirsty. Even in her dream, she had thought that she was burned by the punishment flame. "You're not scared that I had poisoned you?" Huang Beiyu coldly laughed. "You dared to?" Even if it had poison, she wasn't scared anymore. After she was burned by the punishment flame, her whole body was considered to be immune to hundreds of poisons. Feng Lianyi wasn't even annoyed by her arrogant attitude and tone. In fact, He had thought that was interesting. Huang Bei Yu drank the tea and passed the teacup over to him as though passing it over to a servant. Feng Lian Yian laughed and took it from her. He asked, "Do you want more? Drink." Feng Lian Yi had poured 3 cups of tea continuously for her to drink. Only after that, she thought that her throat had felt better. She cleared her throat and inquired, "You have a problem? The marrow cleansing pill still needs these materials. It's a bit hard to look for." Feng Lian went straight to the point and delivered a folded piece of paper over to her. Huang Bei Yu took it and looked. She noticed that there were only 3 to 4 types of materials written on the paper. She was slightly surprised, only these 3? The materials for the marrow cleansing pill was actually really complicated. There were many different kinds of materials and each one was very precious. He had listed 3 kinds of materials for her. Does that mean he had found the rest of the materials? The method of refining pills, too. Feng Lian Yi nodded his head. These couple of materials were probably only found in the floating forest. It's a little complicated. No problem, no matter how complicated it is, I will find it. Huang Bei Yu placed the paper away. She continued, "The money for the other materials, I will return it back to you later on. Thanks." It is one matter for her to let him refine the marrow cleansing pill. Yet she had never thought of taking advantage of him and let him pay the money for the materials. These couple of materials were precious, that she knew. He was only the prince of the enemy country. Even if he was well respected, that doesn't mean that he is one of the noble families of Nanyi country or that he has infinite money. Even though she wasn't the good person, it doesn't have a conscience. When Feng Lian Yi heard that she was going to give him money, he was stunned. He immediately realized her thought that she didn't wanted to take advantage of him. She also didn't wanted to cause difficulties and have this be used against her. This girl is smart. He didn't reveal her thoughts and he casually asked, "You want to wash your marrows?" "Not for me. Her body was just weak, that's it. Her talent and ability don't need a second thought." She didn't needed to wash her marrows. She wanted the marrow cleansing pill for Dongling to use. Dongling had learned martial arts when she was little. However, after all these years, it had been delayed and her strength wasn't strong. Eventually in the future, she would walk out of Nanyi country. Maybe, she would also walk out of the Cart mainland. Before this could be achieved, she hoped that she could let Dongling be powerful as well. At least, she needed to have the ability to protect herself and to protect Princess Zhong's prefecture. Marrow cleansing pill, this type of high-grade pill, she didn't have the ability to refine this pill for some time. Therefore, she could only resort to others for help. With the marrow cleansing pill added on with her training, she believes it wasn't a difficult task to let Dongling become strong in a short amount of time. Feng Lian Yi stared at her. Based on her cold tone and her attitude towards the Xiao family, he definitely doesn't believe that it was prepared for her siblings. It was hard to imagine that someone like her would consider for other people in such a detailed way. If she didn't wanted to say, he won't forced it out of her. What he was supposed to bring her, he did. It was time for him to leave now. He stood up and was ready to leave when Huang Bei Yu suddenly exclaimed, "Prince Yi, are you a refining pharmacist?" Feng Lian Yi thought about it and seriously replied, "Can't be considered as one." "What do you mean by can't be considered as one?" Huang Bei Yu scrunched her eyebrows. Her impression of him wasn't that great. Now that she heard him speak, she thought it was pretty bad. "I had just started interacting with pills. I learned a little. The ability to have the blood of refining pharmacists is already incredible." Huang Bei Yu fairly stated. It's just that she had not figured out what his profession was. Was it a warrior, a summoner, or a refining pharmacist? Based on the battle experience from last time, his skills were very strong. Probably stronger than her. She had only saw his martial arts. Therefore, she automatically classified him as a warrior. But then there would no reason for him to steal the Lotus Flame Furnace. This person was unfathomable and with too many secrets. All she saw right now was only one corner of the glacier. "You are jealous of refining pharmacists?" Feng Lian Yi laughed. He saw her expression and he suddenly had a thought. Can't really say jealous. However, I think that becoming a refining pharmacist would benefit me a lot. Huang Beiyu honestly replied. In this era, the stronger the better. But in order to be strong, the methods of refining pills and devices tools couldn't be left out. The methods of refining pills. 3. The refining pharmacist's refining pills and the refiner's tools were all needed for her to be strong. The lineage of refining pharmacists is more strict. Feng Lian used one hand and held onto his chin. He slowly exclaimed, however, maybe the marrow cleansing pill could help you. Huang Beiyu faintly smiled. The knowledge she knew for refining pills was a bit different compared to this era. Thus, she had failed when she tried to refine pills before. In this era, the lineage that Feng Lianyi had mentioned was too rare. She didn't need to rely on the marrow cleansing pill for that little to no chance. She has her own way. However, she hadn't told that to Feng Lianyi. It's not because she was stingy and selfish, but there was no point in mentioning something that even she wasn't sure. Oh right. To refine the marrow cleansing pill, it is necessary to acquire the snake gall of a three-eyed spirit snake. These types of snakes are rare. Even if we went inside the floating forest, we might not find it. Is there any other snake galls that could substitute for it? There aren't that many spirit snakes of the same rank. Feng Lianyi slowly thought about it. There was a faint stream of light on his handsome face. Huang Beiyu couldn't help but to secretly admired how handsome he was. How about one which is higher rank? Huang Beiyu asked casually. Feng Lianyi grinned faintly. That smile wasn't a mockery of her casual talk but instead, towards the question of higher rank snakes than the three-eyed spirit snake. Three-eyed spirit snake is a rank spirit beast. The higher the rank, the rarer it is. Probably. Will this work? The space ring on her hand had shined and a small snake with a bright red body was in her hand. That snake was very tiny, about the size of a finger. It was about 1/2 feet tall and its head was already chopped off. Even if it was dead, the bright red body still lets out a strange light. Feng Lianyi's eyes slightly squinted and he was shocked. Sky-swallowing red snake. It's just a baby snake. Huang Beiyu shook the baby snake's body. When she thought about when the snake's other companion had bit her and she almost died, she felt so annoyed. The baby snake is already precious. Feng Lianyi had a wide range of knowledge and in his heart right now, he was really surprised. How did this girl randomly took something out and took out a super spirit beast, the sky-swallowing red snake? After the sky-swallowing red snake had turned into an adult, it would evolve into a godly beast. This type of spiritual beast had not been heard of for thousands of years in Kart mainland. Because they were too rare, many had thought that they were extinct. The baby snake in her hand looked as though it was the weaker one of the two. No wonder it had died in her hand. If she had encountered the strong one, even if it was a baby beast, it would be hard to deal with. I had heard that the sky-swallowing red beast is a super spiritual beast. Its snake gall should be a higher rank than the three-eyed spiritual snake. That is naturally true. With the implement of the snake gall from the sky-swallowing red snake into the pill, the marrow-cleansing pill that is refined would most definitely be one level higher than the pill with three-eyed spiritual snake's gall. That would be great. Huang Beiyu was overjoyed. If the pill properties were higher by a level, the effect will be greater and the benefit for Dongling will be bigger. She gave the baby sky-swallowing red snake to Feng Lianyi and let him take the gall for the pill. The sky was completely lit and Princess Zhong's prefecture had become busy. It was inconvenient for him to stay, so Feng Lianyi had gotten ready to leave. Before he left, he went back and stated, if you want to become a refining pharmacist, when the marrow cleansing pill is being refined, you can stay by the side and watch. The methods of refining pills. 4. Huang Beiyu was shocked. Weren't refining pharmacists supposed to be antisocial? Especially when they're refining pills, people should never startle them. I can watch. Huang Beiyu couldn't help but become suspicious. He's not joking around. If it's you, definitely yes. A young man covered in white raised his black jewels-like eyes. She slightly smiled at him and his elegant temperament led one to believe in him. Huang Beiyu slightly curled her lips. Yet, But she still couldn't put her guard down against this mysterious person. Footsteps rang outside and Feng Lianyi faintly nodded his head. He had quickly left from the window. Dongling pushed the door open and walked in. Her face was a little gloomy as she slightly panted. Once Huang Beiyu had seen that expression, there was an uneasy feeling in her heart. The Crown Prince had gathered all the masters in the imperial capital. He claimed that there was a spiritual beast in Lingyang College that had caused harm to others. He ordered for people to go in and check. Dongling immediately told her what news she had found before she even had time to adjust her breathing. Right now, the outside was noisy and busy. People all claimed that the Crown Prince was under some unknown spell, thus he was about to tear faces with the Lingyang College. Lingyang College had over 1,000 years of history in Nanyi country and its status is not just ordinarily high. Although the Crown Prince Zhongyi had always been popular, but compared with the deep-rooted Lingyang College, there was a lot of difference. His actions, without a doubt, had led those people who wanted him to make a mistake become joyful. Huang Beiyu thought back to what she had heard in the Prime Minister's prefecture. Those who were with Prime Minister Qi right now used all kinds of means to harm the prestige the Crown Prince had built with its people. Isn't now the best chance for them? If this situation became big and Lingyang College was involved, then the group of people on Prime Minister Qi's side would have some dirt against the Crown Prince. If they altered the situation into what they believed it was, then even if the Crown Prince had 100 mouths, it can't be explained clearly. Huang Beiyu automatically sat up. She scrunched her eyebrows and communicated with the Ice Luan spirit bird in her heart. Ice, can you move around? Yes, Master. The Ice Luan spirit bird's voice sounded, though it was weaker than usual. The power of the punishment flame isn't that easy to endure. It's all up to you. Huang Beiyu's clear eyes shined. You don't need to do anything. Just appear in front of the Crown Prince and he'll understand. If the Ice Luan spirit bird is fine, then Huang Beiyu naturally would be fine too. In this era, the deep-rooted idea was that the summoner and the spirit beast's lives were intertwined. They both live and die together. They had all thought that she and the Ice Luan spirit bird had made a life contract with each other. Therefore, as long as the Ice Luan spirit bird had appeared, then Zhongyi's worry would be gone. Young miss, what happened? Dongling saw that she suddenly went silent. She had no idea what happened. Huang Beiyu finished explaining what to do to the Ice Luan spirit bird and then she raised her head and smiled. There's no problem. Dongling felt slightly comforted. She sat down on the bed and wiped off the sweat from her head. Then she suddenly became to lowly laughed. Young miss, when I went outside a while ago, I had heard something else that was very interesting. The methods of refining pills, 5. Oh? What is making you so happy? Ice Luan spirit bird had left and Huang Beiyu became more at ease. She had found it surprising as to how happy Dongling was. Dongling covered her mouth and said in a small voice, when I was on my way back, I saw Pei Xiong. Concubine Qin had vented her bad temper at her. Why was Concubine Qin in a bad temper? Dongling smiled. It's due to Princess Hongling's birthday banquet from yesterday. Prime Minister Qi had gotten angry. Yesterday Xiao Yun had said those words in front of the young misses and masters which soon spread out towards the noble ladies in the imperial capital. Everyone had said that those who are not in the same family won't go in the same door. How the mother was like, the daughter naturally will be like that too. And how the young sister was like, will the older sister be any better off? The wife of Ping Bei, who was a famous and dignified person ever since she was a child. After she was married to Ping Bei, who, she had taught her ways to her child. She was a model among the noble ladies. This time, because of a scandal that had happened in the past regarding her second sister, her reputation was tainted. How could she be happy? Princess Hongling was also influenced by Xiao Ru's improper behavior, which led her to be the object of private discussions among the young misses. Her development with the third prince was originally pretty good, yet after yesterday, the third prince was cold and indifferent towards her. Princess Hongling had run to the wife of Ping Bei Hu and cried. It had happened that the wife of Ping Bei Hu was also unsatisfied, so she got angry and told this problem to the wife of the Prime Minister. The wife of Ping Bei Yu was the daughter of the wife of the Prime Minister. The wife of the Prime Minister and the mother of concubine Qin had strived for favoritism over the years, which led the prefecture to be unpeaceful. Now, due to this situation, the wife of the Prime Minister now had something to use against her. That night, the wife of the Prime Minister had a pillow talk with Prime Minister Qi. After that, Prime Minister Qi was infuriated. His daughter's reputation and his favorite granddaughter's future, concubine Qi and Xiao Yu, would never catch up with these two people's status in Prime Minister Qi's heart. This morning, concubine Qin had made servants go to the Prime Minister's prefecture to send gifts. Originally, it was large quantities of top-notch blood swallow that she had bought at an expensive price. She wanted to send some to her mother, and naturally, she also wanted to please the wife of Prime Minister Qi and the wife of Ping Bei Hu. So she had sent some over to them too. Who knew that the servant had just entered the door of Prime Minister's prefecture when they had met Prime Minister Qi, who had just got off the royal court. Prime Minister Qi was in a fit of anger at that moment and had seen that it was a servant sent by concubine Qin. He automatically told people to kick them out. The servant who had sent the gift wasn't smart. They had mumbled a few sentences under their breath, and it was heard by Prime Minister Qi. Under his wrath, he had let his people beat the servant half to death. Then he commanded the people that from now on, anyone that is from concubine Qin's place wouldn't be allowed in the prefecture at all. That servant was carried back to Princess Zhong's prefecture, and he reported back to concubine Qin. Concubine Qi had turned pale in that instant. She had fainted for a while, and after she had woken up, she kept crying as tears fell down her face. She had relieved her bad temper by yelling at servants. This time, it was impossible to count on Prime Minister Qi to save Xiaozhong Qi. Prime Minister Qi was someone who values his reputation. When she had made a mistake in the past, Prime Minister Qi had kicked her out the family door. After all these years, that anger had gradually diminished. Plus, now that she slowly had some status in Princess Zhong's prefecture, Prime Minister Qi had slightly accepted her and her two children. But who knew that that incident was scooped out by someone again? Xiao Ru cried and explained what had happened yesterday at Prime Minister's prefecture. Concubine Qin was so mad that her eyes had protruded out. What a good Xiao Yun! What a good concubine Shui! After Huang Bei Yu had heard everything, she had held onto her stomach and laughed very hard. Concubine Shui and Xiao Yun really do have some skills. Just a couple of words and concubine Qin had lost their support from the Prime Minister's prefecture. The methods of refining pills. 5. Since concubine Qin doesn't have Prime Minister Qi's help, she could only come here and beg young Miss R. Dong Ling laughed happily. All these years, she had waited to watch as concubine Qin and Shui lose their powers. It would be best if they had received retribution. It won't work out even if they beg me. If Xiaozhong Qi didn't hand the lotus flame furnace over, would Angua Gong let him go? Huang Bei Yu embraced the quilt and a strand of black hair fell onto it. It shined the way above average silk would have. It showed off the white and delicate skin tone on her face. After she had finished wiping the jadeite liquid on her wounds, the wounds that weren't so deep began to slowly heal. Now, there weren't any visible traces. The eldest young master is definitely going to be a scapegoat. He has no choice. Dong Ling was extremely joyful. Now that she saw these people had received retribution, she was happier than anyone else. This situation, no matter how hard Angua Gong tries to check, they won't be able to check it to their side. They would be able to play them to death without leaving any traces. The two people had sat and chatted when someone suddenly knocked on the door. At this time, who would be coming? Dong Ling was suspicious, but she went and opened the door. Fourth young miss, why are you here? Dong Ling, is third sister here? Xiao Ru's voice seemed to be anxious. It looked like what happened this morning in Prime Minister's prefecture had given her too much of a shock. She had thought that since the Prime Minister's prefecture had supported them in the past, they didn't need to be worried about anything. But now, even her grandfather didn't support them anymore. Her brother had caused trouble and her mother was so indecent. The only person she could have begged at this time was her third sister, who always had a kind heart. We were affected by the cold last night and couldn't sleep. We had just been able to sleep right now. Dongling explained in a kind voice. Xiao Ru was immediately worried. Then what do I do? Can I wait here until the second sister wakes up? Dongling faintly smiled. Fourth young miss, don't you have to go to college? Our young miss probably can't go today. I don't want to go. Xiao Ru suddenly frightenedly shook her head. I'm not going to the college. What happened? Dongling was smart. As soon as she had heard Xiao Ru's terrified tone, she knew something bad had happened. Xiao Ru snuck her nose in. The voice seemed as though she would have cried at any moment. Now anyone in this prefecture, whoever comes out, they would die. Angua Gong didn't dare to go to Lingyang College to cause troubles, so he ordered people to surround our prefecture. If they saw someone that left the prefecture, they won't show any mercy. When did this start? Dongling let out a gasp. When she left the prefecture, everything was fine. How come just a while later, this had happened? It happened just before. That Xueche seemed to have woken up. He had placed the blame on my brother for why he was punished by the honorable spirit. He said he will come here for revenge. Father had come back from the royal court but was stuck on the road home. He was threatened by people in Angua Gong's prefecture. Dongling was secretly happy. Angua Gong had lost the lotus flame furnace, so obviously he wouldn't have let this go. He would have used any means to get it back. She was ecstatic in her heart, but on the surface, Dongling had scrunched her eyebrows and replied, "But if this was the case, fourth young miss, there is no point in finding our young miss R. Our young miss is weak and sick since childhood and she doesn't have any power. There is nothing she can do. No. Now in Princess Zhong's prefecture, they are only afraid of third sister R." Xiao Ru immediately explained her plan. Ever since last time when the emperor got mad at the palace banquet, everyone knew how much the emperor values third sister. If I go out with third sister, then I'll definitely be safe. Dongling laughed coldly in her heart. Now that she knew how good young miss actually is, she would shamelessly come here and considered herself sisters with the young miss. Did she forget how she had bullied the young miss before? The methods of refining pills. 7. Fourth young miss, as long as you don't leave the prefecture, you are also safe. Dongling pretended to comfort her. Angua Gong only dared to cause trouble outside the prefecture. They wouldn't dare to come to the prefecture and challenge them. After all, they were still afraid of the prestige of Princess Zhong's prefecture. If this was the Xiao family's old residence, Angua Gong's people probably would have already had barged in and beaten the people. Xiao Ru hesitated before she exclaimed with a slightly red face, But today I had made an appointment with the fifth young miss from the government minister's prefecture to go tour the lake. After she had heard this, Dongling really wanted to scold this fourth young miss who has no brain whatsoever. During this period of time, she actually wanted to go out and tour the lake. So actually she had come here to find young miss not because she was afraid she couldn't go to Lingyang College and attend the class, but because she wanted to tour the lake. Therefore, she wanted to take young miss out with her so that Angua Gong's people would be afraid to make any moves. No matter how good Dongling's temperament was, at this time her tone of voice had become colder. "Fourth young miss, we're at a troubled time right now. It's better to not go outdoors. After the third sister wakes up, she probably might want to go out and get some fresh air. Our young miss isn't feeling well. She won't be going out today," Dongling explained in a calm voice. "Fourth young miss, please go back. You should think about what to do with your days in the future after the eldest young master had caused that kind of trouble." Xiao Ru's face turned red. She wanted to continue speaking, but Dongling didn't need to pass their days looking at their faces anymore. She moved back a step and closed the door. It was the first time Xiao Ru had a door closed in her face, especially from a maid of someone she had looked down upon. At that moment, anger had risen from her heart. She wanted to yell, but then she realized that she needed to rely on Huang Beiyu in the future. So she could only hold on to the stomach of anger. Dongling walked inside while she had mumbled and scolded the fourth young miss. What type of things are they? They dared to use the young miss as a shield. Dream on. Huang Beiyu had clearly heard the conversation from the inside. At this moment her eyebrows were wrinkled. At this time, why does Xiao Ru still want to go outside? She wants to tour the lake with a young miss from the government minister's prefecture. The young miss was the daughter of a concubine. These young misses don't think about good things at all. Who knows what they had planned this time? Dongling said with disdain. Tour the lake. Huang Bei, you thought it wasn't that simple. Xiao Ru would risk her life to just tour a lake. As she thought about it, someone had knocked on the door again. Huang Bei, you had a thought in her mind and let Dongling opened the door. It was concubine Shui and Xiao Yun who had come. After what had happened at the Prime Minister's prefecture, both mother and daughter were really happy. Third young miss, I heard that you're not feeling well again. I had brought medicine for you again. Huang Bei, you crawled out from the quilt and coughed under her hand a couple times. She stated in a hoarse voice, sorry to trouble concubine Shui. Concubine Shui had seen that she was very weak and her eyebrows furrowed. Xiao Yun's face had automatically turned bad-looking. Third young miss, your body is so weak. Are you able to go outside? Concubine Shui carefully asked. It was obviously about touring the lake. Huang Bei, you revealed a weak smile. Go outside to do what? Obviously for good things. Concubine Shui looked at Xiao Yun and hurriedly explained, this year Xiao Yarrow Wang hosted a pill event at the Blue Lakes. It was heard that recently he had refined a spiritual pill. The noble families in the imperial capital will all go and take a look at it. So it was the pill event. In this era, because there was rarely any refining pharmacists, this led them to become one of the most popular events on Cart mainland. Every time they had refined a miracle medicine, they would invited companions to go and evaluated the product together. Those who had heard about this would all hurried to compete to see the elegant bearing of the spiritual pill. The methods of refining pills. 8. Therefore, what originally was supposed to be a private pill event, slowly turned into a grand gathering. Xiao Yarrow Wang had been reclusive for many years and he disliked having to show his face. He had never opened any pill events when he had refined a spiritual pill. This time he had only invited a couple of his friends to take a look at the recently refined spiritual pill. Who knew how the news had passed on? Those who had heard the news all hurried to the Blue Lakes to take a look. This was Xiao Yarrow Wang's first pill event, therefore, everyone wanted to take a look at it. It made sense why Xiao Ru didn't even want her life as long as she could go see. Huang Bei, you held a little interest over this. Besides learning the secret of the beast without boundaries, she also wanted to quickly master the methods of refining pills. So she had sat up and said, Xiao Yarrow Wang's pill event, I also want to take a look. Concubine Shui and Xiao Yun exchanged an ecstatic look. They both thought that Huang Bei, you was a stupid person and didn't understand anything. Your body is weak, drink some medicine first. Then you can go with your second sister. Concubine Shui delivered the bowl of medicine over. Huang Bei, you shook her head and exclaimed, I just drank the medicine that Dongling had got for me. It's not good to drink some more. Just place the medicine here for now and I will drink it at night. Concubine Shui now had to rely on her so naturally, she wouldn't force her to drink it. Anyways, she drank this medicine every day so the poison in her body was already deep-rooted. It's fine if she didn't drink the medicine for a day or two. Okay, that's fine. Let Dongling dress you up warmly. We will be in the front yard waiting. The horse carriage has already been prepared. Huang Bei, you nodded her head and watched as concubine Shui and Xiao Yun left. Then she had got off the bed and changed into casual clothes. Young miss, are you really going? You just got better. Dongling was a little worried. When young miss had got back, she was so weak and haven't rested yet. Would something happen to her if she went out? Don't worry, my body is really well. Huang Bei, you smiled. After she was burned by the punishment flame, the toxin that was compiled in her body over the years were burned off. The body that she has now is a healthy body. As long as she nurses and nourish her body for a while, there will naturally be no problems. After she saw Huang Bei use confident smile, Dongling was comforted. She covered her with a cloak, then they walked out the door together. In the front yard, Xiao Yun had already dressed up and waited there. There was no clue as to where Xiao Ru had gotten the news, but she had also dressed up nicely and followed them out. She was late, but no one dared to show a bit of dissatisfaction to her. Even Xiao Yun didn't dare to say anything. Third sister, let me sit with you in one horse carriage. When Xiao Ru had seen her, she immediately walked up to her. Xiao Ru was the type of person who only thought about themselves. Even the situation with concubine Qin. Concubine Qin's reputation was ruined, and Dong Ling had randomly said a couple statements which led her to want to separate her relationship with concubine Qin. These type of people were the easiest to use and manipulate. Although Huang Beiyu looked down upon Xiao Ru in her heart, she still needed to use Xiao Ru's confidence. Therefore, she slightly pretended to agree. Okay, come on. Once she had said this, Xiao Yun was upset. She put up a blank face and exclaimed, "Third sister, you had promised me before that you would sit in the same horse carriage as me." Angua Gong's people were outside. With the emperor's support, despite how fearless Angua Gong was, he didn't dare to make any move in public towards Huang Beiyu. At this point, those who were with her in the same horse carriage would be the safest. Huang Beiyu thought in her heart, when did I say that? However, she had no spare time to make a choice between Xiao Ru and Xiao Yun. She had just let Dong Ling help her up the horse carriage. My head is dizzy today, so I might have forgotten. Second sister and fourth sister, whoever wants to be in the same carriage as me, come up. The methods of refining pills. 9. After she had finished saying this, she let Dong Ling place the curtain down. She sat inside and waited for people outside to argue. Not much time later, Xiao Yun had opened the curtain and walked in. Outside, Xiao Ru was weeping. Huang Beiyu slightly raised her eyebrows. She admired Xiao Yun a little. In this world, the weak were praised to the strong. Those without strong strength, they were going to be stepped on forever. Crying would never fix the problem. Xiao Yun, this person, was harsh in that she had inherited concubine Shue's scorpion-like heart. As long as she wants to meet her goal, she would do anything. Xiao Ru, on the other hand, is weak strength and selfish. Compared to Xiao Yun, she was much easier to be dealt with. The Blue Lakes was at Lin Huai City's south side. The scenery was elegant and was said to be Lin Huai City's best landscape. On the vast expanse of the lake, there are several beautiful decorated pleasure boats that seemed to float around. Inside the decorated pleasure boats, zither notes transmitted outside. When looked from far away, there were a few sporadic mountain peaks in the center of the lake. The mountains were green and covered by fog. It seemed to be a scene from paradise. On the edge of the Blue Lakes, a row of willows was planted. Many pavilions were built and people walked through them as though they had walked out of a painting. The artistic conception was extraordinary. At this time, because of Xiao Yarrow Wang's pill event, half of the imperial capital's people had all arrived here. By the lake, there was a crowd of people who argued for renting boats. They had walked all the way from here, and other than Angua Gong's people who had secretly followed them from behind, they had not encountered any attacks. The good thing here is that it's the imperial capital. Princess Beiyu was in the horse carriage, and after all, Angua Gong's people didn't dare to make any moves towards her. She had walked down from the horse carriage. The sky had fluttered with drizzles and light rain. The willows were luxurious, and at the Blue Lakes, this scenery seemed to have come from a painting. Dong Ling hurriedly opened the paper umbrella and blocked the rain. Huang Beiyu drew the cloak closer to her. She looked back to see Xiao Yun and Xiao Ru. The two of them were gorgeously dressed and looked extraordinary. The two had brought numerous maids. Those who opened the paper umbrella opened it. Those who carried things carried it. Their manners were way bigger than the Grand Princess Beiyu. So what if their manners were bigger? There were many people by the Blue Lakes. Everyone had gone over and fought for boats. People were full on the decorated pleasure boats. The private decorated pleasure boats were mainly owned by royal and noble families. Princess Zhong's prefecture had no boats. Xiao Ru stretched her neck and looked through the crowd. She was extremely anxious. Where is Sister Wan? You guys go look. Sister Wan was Government Minister Lin's prefecture's young miss who was born from a concubine. Her name was Lin Wan Jun. In Lingyang College, she and Xiao Ru were really good friends. Young miss, we can't find Lady Wan. She probably had gotten on the boat already. Her maid had looked around in a circle and still hadn't found her. She said she would wait for me. Xiao Ru lowly resented. Xiao Yun sneered. She had ordered the servants to get a boat for her no matter what they do. She then leaned against the horse carriage with the paper umbrella on. Huang Beiyu looked in the crowd and there wasn't anyone that she knew. She originally thought that when she got here, she could have rented a boat. She had never thought that there would be so many people here. Not to say to rent a boat, even walking to the bank would be difficult. There were countless decorated boats on the blue lakes. Those who stood on the boat and stared at the people by the bank were naturally proud. Those by the bank were obviously secretly jealous. Young miss, we rented a boat but it's too small. It's probably not enough. After a while, Xiao Yun's people had come back and reported. The servant was badly battered. It was obvious that when they had gone to rent a boat. Enough for how many people? Xiao Yun was a little disgusted. Useless thing. The methods of refining pills, 10, the servant stated, probably, only enough for 1 to 2 people. What type of broken boat is that? Xiao Yun heard that and immediately got angry. A boat only enough for 1 to 2 people was probably the boats that fishermen went on to catch fish. The servant cried and explained, young miss, there was only these types of broken boats left. The other boats were bought away by other people. They are already on the surface of the lake. Xiao Yun clenched her teeth, just enough for 1 to 2 people, right? Then she can't bring along her maids. She turned around to look at Huang Beiyu and pretended to offer her a ride. Third sister, come on the boat with me. The small fisherman boat enough for only 1 to 2 people can't possibly catch up to those big decorated pleasure boats. Probably by the time they had reached the center of the lake, the pill event had ended. Huang Beiyu naturally wouldn't have gotten on with her. She shook her head. The boat is too small and I get dizzy on water. I am scared to get on. Dizzy on water? You're that useless? Xiao Yun was infuriated. If she doesn't have Huang Beiyu with her, then how could she become friends with Xiao Yarrow Wang? Dong Ling hurriedly exclaimed, Second lady, our young Mrs. Body isn't feeling well today. She probably can't go. If you're not going then fine. Xiao Yun coldly sneered. She brought a maid along with her and got on the boat. At this time, Xiao Ru had found the government minister's prefecture's Lin Wn Jun in the crowd. Although Lin Wn Jun was a young miss born from a concubine, she had the talent of a summoner. Therefore, government minister Lin extremely valued her. The treatment of young miss born from a concubine wasn't any worse than the young miss of the first wife. Today government minister's prefecture had bought a couple big boats. Lin Wn Jun had come to an agreement with Xiao Ru, so she had agreed for Xiao Ru to come onto the boat. But when she saw Huang Beiyu, Lin Wn Jun had coldly mentioned, Sister Ru, our family's boat isn't a huge boat. It's already crowded when you come on. It can't fit anyone else. These young misses born from a concubine were usually jealous of young misses from different prefectures that were born from the first wife. Now that they had found a chance to suppress them, they showed no mercy. After Xiao Ru had a boat, she didn't depend on Huang Beiyu. She said, Third sister, the wind is huge on the blue lakes. Your body is weak so you shouldn't come on. Huang Beiyu looked at her coldly. She wasn't mad but Dong Ling was now in a bad mood. She sneered, Fourth young miss, you should enjoy it to the full extent. Be careful, the wind is big. Once she had finished, a young boy's voice rang from behind, Princess Beiyu. After that, a young boy who wore a gorgeous ferret and a 7-color gemstone on the belt ran over. Once he saw Huang Beiyu, his eyes had smiled. It's really you. You are also going to the Blue Lakes to see the pill event. Huang Beiyu turned her head over to look. It was the young master of the Bug'er family, Luo Luo. Because her impression of Luo Luo was pretty good, she had smiled and nodded her head. Coincidentally, I am also going. I had told people to drive the boat over here. How about you come with me? I'm quite bored by myself. Luo Luo's enthusiasm was very pure. It was not because Huang Beiyu was pushed aside by others that he had invited her. Huang Beiyu couldn't help but like his personality. She had agreed without even thinking about it. I was just worried about not having a boat, thank you. Fourth lady, hope you have fun. Dong Ling smiled at Xiao Ru when she said this. After that, she had walked with Huang Beiyu along with Luo Luo to the bank. Xiao Ru rolled her eyes and said, "Where did this smelly boy come from?" Lin Wen Jun was shocked from the start when she had saw Luo Luo. When he left, she got back from her trance. When she heard what Xiao Ru said, she surprisingly exclaimed, "You don't know who he is?" "Who is he?" Xiao Ru was baffled. The methods of refining pills. 11. He is the young master from the Bai Jie family, Luo Luo. Lin Wen Jun stomped her foot when she said this. Do you know the Bai Jie family? Young master Luo Luo had just came to the imperial capital lately. He rarely shows his face. But he will be Bai Jie family's heir in the future. Bu Jie family? You are saying that he's from the Bu Jie family? Xiao Ru was shocked that her brain had turned into chaos. Which other Bu Jie families are there? Lin Wen Jun wanted to look down upon this girl without any knowledgeable. Ru, how does your sister know him? How should I know? After she had figured out Luo Luo's status, Xiao Ru was even more jealous of Huang Beiyu. Why is that all the good luck is with Huang Beiyu? She was born from the first wife and personally rewarded with the title Princess Beiyu by the emperor. She had rich lands and Princess Zhong was a very prestigious woman among the people. Her indecent mother cannot be compared with Princess Zhong. When Princess Zhong was dead, she originally thought that Huang Beiyu's good luck had come to an end. It was unclear why recently, this Huang Beiyu seemed to become more and more powerful. On the other hand, because of her mother's misconduct and due to the troubles caused by her brother, she was suppressed in Linhuai City. In Xiao Ru's heart, the more she thought about it the madder she became. The Bu Jie family's huge ship came from the port. The body of the ship had absorbed water deeply which caused the surrounding small boats to flip over. The ship's body was drawn with the emblem of Bu Jie family, the Red Cross star. On top of the bow of the ship, a male eagle which was about to take flight was carved on it. It was very lifelike and the surrounding people had all sucked a breath in. The Bu Jie family are. Even Bu Jie family had came are. Through the voice of discussion, the suspension bridge was slowly laid down from the big ship. A gorgeously dressed teenager reached out in a gentlemanly manner, gently holding the arm of the beautiful girl next to her. He slowly took her from the suspension bridge onto the boat. Her back was fragile but noble, petite but held an air of arrogance. Who is that girl? I had never seen her before. That is the daughter of Princess Zhong, Princess Beiyu are. Those who knew had explained loudly. Princess Beiyu. It was rumored that she was nonsense. A couple of days ago, Princess Beiyu had killed the rampant Shuemeng on Lingyang College's arena. Such a brave girl, how could she be a waste? That's right. Like mother like daughter. Our Princess Zhong's daughter will be like her mother too, strong and brave. Right. Princess Beiyu will definitely become like Princess Zhong. Princess Beiyu is very brave. Unbelievable. Huang Beiyu's mouth slightly curled up after she had heard the praise from the bottom of the ship. It's not that she liked being praised. On the other hand, she liked how others had praised Princess Zhong. Hopefully, the reputation of the warm and generous Princess Zhong wasn't ruined by Huang Beiyu. Princess, your mother is well respected by the people. Luo Luo turned his head around and seriously stated. His clear eyes sparkled every now and then. Huang Beiyu nodded her head. Her face had revealed a soft but proud smile. Right, she is a very incredible woman. Once they ascended the ship, they had looked around. On the vast lake, numerous boats and ships had floated around. The scenery was beautiful. Luo Luo turned around to make a command. The people of Bu Jie family had immediately set sail. The methods of refining pills. 12. The ship had set sail and waves had gone up and down every now and then. The surrounding small boats had tumbled over due to the changing waves. Xiao Yarrow Wang's boat is over there. We can go over there and get on his boat. Then we can see the actual new spiritual pill he had just refined lately. Luo Luo pointed towards a large boat ahead. Will Xiao Yarrow Wang let us on his boat? Huang Bei, you had never thought that they would have been able to get on the boat. Her best plan was to stroll around nearby. Yes, Xiao Yarrow Wang and our family's relationship had always been good. Luo Luo explained without any schemes. He had no intentions of bragging. When with pure people, she didn't need to guess around or defend herself. This type of interaction was very simple. The ship had got to the center of the lake. Huang Beiyu's eyes had swept over and seen Xiao Yun's small boat. Xiao Yun, without a doubt, was an ice-attributed 3-star summoner. Normally, ice attributes' control on water would be very strong. She looked at Xiao Yun, who held only the ice feather. The ice feather had a fluorescent glow to it. Xiao Yun had injected the vitality into the ice feathers and she gently padded in the water. The boat quickly and smoothly traveled on the water. She did this easily, did this confidently and quickly. Xiao Yun's gorgeous dress swayed on the hazy lake surface. The strands of her hairs had flown around her. The delicate look on her face was filled with proudness and confidence. She placed no one on the lake in her eyes. There were countless small boats on the lake surface which was envious of her. Huang Beiyu leaned on the ship's side and looked far into the distance. The clear eyes had turned around and her mouth revealed a faint smile. Young Master Luo Luo, drive the ship faster. Otherwise, by the time we get there, Xiao Yarrow Wang's pill event would have ended. You're right, drive it quicker. Luo Luo nodded his head. He immediately went in and ordered the crew to do so. The crew had set the sails open to its full extent. Combining the wind on the lake and maneuvering of the boat, the huge body of the lake moved forward. They had originally passed many small boats and ships. Only Xiao Yun's boat was hidden in the front. Due to the sudden increase in the acceleration of the boat, huge waves suddenly appeared on the surface of the lake. The huge ship had driven over and the water had splashed on both sides. When it passed Xiao Yun, she was unlucky. A wave of water had rushed over and her small boat immediately began to wobble over. Her face had changed and she immediately made a layer of ice on the surface of the water with the ice feathers which at least had stabilized the boat. Huang Bei, you wanted to laugh loudly. What can such a thin layer of ice do? It can still turn the boat over. Of course, after the first wave had turned over, the second wave had followed up. It was bigger than the first. Added on with the splashes of the water, the layer of ice that Xiao Yun had made with a huge effort had shattered. Ah! The maid on the boat screamed and Xiao Yun had slapped her. What are you yelling for? She hadn't finished her statement when the boat had flipped over. Dong Ling, who on the big ship had held in the laughter but now laughed loudly. This is how the big ships bully the small boats. Luo Luo was an innocent person but that scenery was really humorous. He couldn't help but to guffaw out loud with Dong Ling. Huang Beiyu was a bit calmer. Her lips had slightly curled up. She pulled on the emerald green cloak and sneezed. She said, "It's so cold outside." The methods of refining pills. 13. Let's go in. Luo Luo hurriedly said with concern. Huang Beiyu surprisingly took a look at him. You're not going to save her? She bullies others. I don't like her, so I don't care whether she dies or not. Luo Luo unruly explained. A summoner who knew how to use ice attribute would not die in the water so easily. The most that would have happened was that they would have suffered getting a little wet. The boats behind might be kind and save her. However, Xiao Yun was too arrogant before. Many people were unhappy with her. Now that she was turned over by the two waves, the people behind are more likely to take joy in her misfortune. She had not said that the person who caused her to be in the water was her sister. From so far away, plus with the drizzles on the lake, how could she have seen it clearly? Huang Beiyu took a faint look at Xiao Yun, who was struggling in the water, as walked back to the cabin to rest. It hadn't taken long before the huge ship caught up to Xiao Yarrow Wang's ship. It was a 3-floor decorated pleasure boat, carved and embroidered. It had an imposing manner around it. Xiao Yarrow Wang and the Bujia family really did have a close relationship. Once Xiao Yarrow Wang had heard the servant report that Bug's ship had come closer, he had personally brought people over and stood on the deck and waited. The two ships had slowly moved closer. After the connected wooden bridge was placed, Luo Luo carefully pulled Huang Beiyu over. He feared that she would fall. Therefore, he had walked slowly. After they got off the wooden bridge, Xiao Yarrow Wang was able to see Huang Beiyu clearly. He was a little surprised and said, You had come also? Behind Xiao Yarrow Wang stood in front of many unfamiliar high-ranking people. She saw Feng Lianyi behind him. As always, he had a smile on. The smile is gentle and elegant in the eyes of others. However, in her eyes, he is a cold and heartless person. I had met Princess Beiyu on the bank, so we had come together on the same boat. Luo Luo smiled while he explained. He couldn't wait. Wang Yi, where is the newly refined spiritual pill of yours? Let me see. There is no spiritual pill. It's just a pill for strengthening the body. Xiao Yarrow Wang explained faintly. He took a look at Huang Beiyu and that gaze was meaningful. The pill for strengthening the body refined by Xiao Yarrow Wang is naturally better than that of ordinary people. Luo Luo's compliments were always sincere. Even Xiao Yarrow Wang couldn't help but smile. Then, he led everyone into the cabin. A shining pill with an orange glow was placed on the table in the middle of the cabin. It was contained in a high-quality purple box. The pill glowed with brilliance and at first glance, they all knew it was extraordinary. There was a strong scent of medicine in the cabin. Just from the smell, it made people feel refreshed. It was obvious that the pill was indeed a good thing. It was the first time that Huang Beiyu had seen such a good refined pill. She was also surprised. So she couldn't help but look at it for a couple more times. She thought about when she first refined a pill and the medicine furnace had exploded. She felt a little shocked back then. When would she be able to refine such a perfect pill? When you smelled this medicine box, how do you feel? Xiao Yarrow Wang walked to her side and smiled warmly when asking this. Very comfortable. The whole body feels comfortable. Huang Beiyu replied honestly. The effect of the pill is not to be underestimated. Xiao Yarrow Wang looked at her with a tint of tenderness in his smile. This pill is made for you. Me. Why would he gift her such a valuable pill? The methods of refining pills. 14. It's merely a jade pill. As long as it can help strengthen your body, then it's good. He said in a light tone as his sincere gaze was directed straight at her. Your health isn't good, so I always worry. I hope you'll recover as soon as possible. This was a sincere gift out of his worry for her. If she continues to refuse, it would seem like she's unreasonable. Thank you, Wang Ye. This grace, Beiyu will remember it. What grace? Can't you think of this as a small gift from a friend? Xiao Yarrow Wang smiled as he looked at her. Faint rays of lights circulated around his handsome face. His manner was like jade, and his temperament was very moving. Huang Beiyu clearly and brightly smiled as she said, Okay, I'll recognize Wang Ye as a friend then. Recognize what? Luo Luo's voice suddenly cut in. He smiled as he walked forward. He innocently blinked his pair of clear black and white eyes. Wow, no wonder you're Xiao Yarrow Wang. The pills you refined, with just a sniff, you can already feel its medicinal properties are. You're overpraising me. Xiao Yarrow Wang humbly said. Luo Luo smiled as he said, This is a jade pill, right? Is this the same pill I ate before? The jade pill is very effective for people who have a weak body since they were young. It directly helps them improve their physique, toughen the tibia, the arteries, and the veins. Usually, only people who are poor in health would eat that pill. When she heard Luo Luo say that, she was somewhat puzzled. How did you eat one? When I came out from the womb, I was already sick. The doctors had said that I wouldn't be able to live past 10 years old. Later, Xiao Yarrow Wang refined a jade pill for me. After I ate that pill, my body got better each day. When Huang Beiyu heard Luo Luo's story, she was amazed. If Luo Luo never told her that he was sick before, she would never believe that he was a sickly person. It seems that the effects of the jade pill aren't ordinary. Pills that have good medicinal properties are also complicated to refine. Xiao Yarrow Wang actually refined a jade pill just for her. It can be seen that he is sincere to her. This kindness, she'll remember it in her heart. Luo Luo looked at the jade pill. As he looked at it, he said, "How does it feel to be a refining pharmacist? You want to learn how to refine pills?" Xiao Yarrow Wang gently patted his folded fan, his gaze slightly slid past Luo Luo and landed on Huang Beiyu. "It's not like if I want to learn and I'll be able to learn it." Luo Luo muttered to himself. "I have no talent for anything. I can only go to the Imperial College. I'm such a failure." "You have many things you have to learn. You don't need to become an expert to excel." Xiao Yarrow Wang used his folded fan to pat Luo Luo's head. Luo Luo let out an "oh" sound and happily turned his head to ask Huang Beiyu, "Princess Beiyu also chose medical science class. Do you also want to become a refining pharmacist? Is there anyone in the world who doesn't want to become a refining pharmacist?" Huang Beiyu lightly asked. When Xiao Yarrow Wang heard Huang Beiyu's words, the expression on his face became thoughtful. The snow-white fan propped up his lower jaw. His skin, compared to the white jade, was even more glossy and smooth. If you want to become a refining pharmacist, then you would need a high-grade earth attribute essence cleansing pill in order to change your innate skill. When Huang Beiyu heard that he was actually seriously considering it, she quickly said, "Wang Ye, you don't have to think about it. I wasn't actually serious. Right now, she doesn't need the innate skill of a refining pharmacist. Instead, she needs a process to slowly fuse everything together. It would take Xiao Yarrow Wang a lot of trouble and a great deal of effort to refine an essence cleansing pill for her. The pill wouldn't even be very useful to her. On the contrary, it would make him very tired." Luo Luo pouted and with a very envious tone said, "Wang Ye is very good to the Princess R." The methods of refining pills. 15. Xiao Yarrow Wang lightly coughed, the expression on his handsome face suddenly become unnatural. A slightly embarrassed red color had flashed across his face. He opened his folded fan and said, "They need me over there, I'm going to go over." Luo Luo and Huang Beiyu exchanged a glance. The two children were incomparably pure and slow in the matter of love. Hence, neither of them gave much thought to it. Just as Xiao Yarrow Wang had gone out, noises arose from the deck outside. Someone had shouted someone is drowning, and then there was a pu tong sound which signaled that someone had jumped into the water. The people who were inside the ship was very curious, so they had walked onto the deck to see the situation. Huang Beiyu and Luo Luo had also followed the other people out. On the deck, the person who was drowning had already been rescued. Suddenly, a burst of crying sounded. The voice was familiar to Huang Beiyu. Dongling suddenly said, "Isn't this the voice of the second young Mrs. Maid?" Sure enough, just as Dongling had finished speaking, they heard a trembling voice say, "My name is Xiao Yun, I am the second young miss of Princess Zhong's prefecture." When Huang Beiyu heard Xiao Yun's self-introduction, she couldn't help but frown. At this time, why would she say that she's from Princess Zhong's prefecture? It's basically bringing disgrace to the prefecture. So it's the second young miss from Princess Zhong's prefecture. Quickly, someone come and help the second young miss to change her clothes. Don't let her freeze. Xiao Yarrow Wang's elegant and refined voice sounded. Xiao Yun's voice was trembling, but it was still gentle and soft as she said, "Many thanks to Wang Ye." Huang Beiyu walked out from the crowd. She only saw that Xiao Yun was being lifted up by other people like a water ghost. The superfluous and the bulky clothes that Xiao Yun had worn before were thrown away by Xiao Yun. Otherwise, once that superfluous and bulky clothes get soaked in water, it would be heavy. The heavy robe would make her sink into the water. So presently, she only wore a thin layer of garment. Her hair was scattered and her face was purple. Luckily, there was no noble lady that liked to gossip on the boat. Or else, appearing like that in front of so many men, people would have talked about how her innocence was ruined. Most of the people on the boat are people who don't bother about trifle matters, so they naturally know to carry out their own duties. They saw that Xiao Yun was so embarrassed and that they shouldn't crowd around her to admire her. So they gradually pretended to have something else to do and began to leave. Second sister. Once the people that were about to leave heard this crisp voice, they couldn't help but to turn around and look at the scene once again. Huang Beiyu ran to Xiao Yun and pulled her hand as she anxiously asked, "Second sister, how did you become like this?" When Xiao Yun saw Huang Beiyu appear in front of her, she was shocked. She didn't expect her to be here. When she fell into the water, no one saved her. She relied on herself as a summoner with an ice attribute to get close to Xiao Yarrow Wang's big ship to be rescued. She was secretly happy that she could slowly return the grace of saving her life to Xiao Yarrow Wang in the future. But right now she was in a sorry state while basking in humiliation, and Huang Beiyu was dressed nicely. Huang Beiyu's bright eyes were quick-witted, her delicate chin that was surrounded by mist-covered water appeared to be more soft and touching. When compared to her, they were polar opposite. Xiao Yun was usually a proud person. She thought that when she's compared to Huang Beiyu, she's high up in the sky. She could never find something that Huang Beiyu is better at than her. However, now she's in this kind of situation, and especially in front of Xiao Yarrow Wang like this. How could this be? Xiao Yun was really angry. Inside her heart, an envious fire burned. The fire burned to such a degree that she almost lost her mind. "Don't come here to ridicule me." Xiao Yun's tone of voice wasn't very heavy. She didn't lose all her rationality yet. She was still a little clear-headed. The methods of refining pills. 16. Don't come here to ridicule me. Xiao Yun's tone of voice wasn't very heavy. She didn't lose all her rationality yet. She was still a little clear-headed. She only wanted to push Huang Beiyu away. But she doesn't know why. When she pushed her, Huang Beiyu's weak body was pushed out. They were just standing at the side of the ship's railing. Coincidentally, Huang Beiyu was pushed off by Xiao Yun and bumped into the ship's railing. She almost flipped over and fell off the boat. A white figure flashed by. He grabbed her hand and pulled her back. "Young miss," Dong Lin shouted as she immediately ran over. She pulled Huang Beiyu into an embrace and lifted her head to show a pair of teary eyes. She said, "Second young miss, when you hurt my young miss at home, no one dared to stop you. But now we're outside, so many pairs of eyes are watching us. Can't you let my young miss still have some face?" The way she worded everything was very clever. With just a few sentences, she was able to expose all the grievance and suffering Huang Beiyu had endured while she was in Princess Zhong's prefecture. However, within her words, there were no words of criticism towards Xiao Yun. From this, it could be seen how much Huang Beiyu and the maid had been bullied by Xiao Yun. It also showed how scared of Xiao Yun they were. The people that were about to leave, once they heard these words, immediately stopped walking. They looked towards Xiao Yun's eyes and expression, which contained quite a bit of anger. Xiao Yun was at a loss for words. She never wanted to push Huang Beiyu into the water. She's not an idiot. With so many people watching, if she had done this kind of thing and the news of this spread, how could she behave herself with integrity in the future? But it was intentional. Huang Beiyu, this damned servant purposely did this. "Huang Beiyu, you want to frame me?" Xiao Yun pointed at her in fury. "I didn't push you at all. Stop trying to pretend that I did. Second young Miss Xiao, if I had stepped in a second too late, Princess Beiyu would have really had fallen into the water. Would she pay such a big price to frame you?" Feng Lianyi lifted his eyes. His eyes were usually warm and friendly. However, at this moment, his eyes were cold. Under those cold eyes, Xiao Yun's heart also became cold. Suddenly, she could no longer say anything. She can't let Huang Beiyu frame her. In a panic, Xiao Yun could only turn her head towards Xiao Yarrow Wang, asking for help. "Wang Ye, I really didn't. Please believe me." Xiao Yarrow Wang is also usually a person who's as gentle as a jade. His gentleness and good manner were well known. However, his face right now was covered in frost. "Second young Miss Xiao, Ben Wang's ship doesn't have woman's clothes. I'm afraid that you'll freeze, so Ben Wang had just sent someone to get you a small boat to take you home." His clear and cold voice made Xiao Yun's heart completely become cold. "I had heard rumors before that you people from Princess Zhong's prefecture, due to Princess Zhong's death, had become undisciplined and out of control. You guys had bullied Princess Bei Yu to the point where she doesn't even dare to leave the prefecture. Before, I didn't believe that someone would have dared to be so bold. Now that I see, those rumors were indeed true. Who gave you the nerve to be so bold and daring? Luo Luo walked up from behind. His young, delicate, and handsome face was taunt. Although he is young, that imposing manner was very strict. Xiao Yun was angry to the point where the pit of her stomach rapidly moved up and down. Just a moment ago, everything was fine. Xiao Yarrow Wang had saved her. That was a golden opportunity for her to get closer to him. But that damned Huang Bei Yu suddenly appeared out of nowhere and destroyed her beautiful plan. No, she can't be impulsive anymore right now. She and her mother had persistently planned this, it can't be so easily destroyed in vain. She really needs the essence cleansing pill and she really wants to marry Xiao Yarrow Wang. The methods of refining pills, 17. In the end, Xiao Yun had inherited concubine Shui's way of thinking. Taking a deep breath, all the jealousy and anger were harshly suppressed down. Third sister, I was too cold before. Maybe I had accidentally pushed you. It wasn't intentional. Huang Bei Yu leaned on Dongling's embrace. The corners of her mouth curved into a smile. Indeed she is Xiao Yun. She is able to easily suppress her anger, this way it would be fun to challenge her. Dongling sniffed her nose. She raised her two tear-filled eyes to take a look at Xiao Yun. Then with panic, she lowered her head with choking sobs. She said, "Yes, the second young miss didn't do that intentionally." Everyone understood the grievances and fear within her voice. Huang Bei Yu almost laughed out loud. Dongling is really quick-witted and crafty. Once she seized an opportunity, she'll harshly hit them. She didn't even give Xiao Yun any ability to turn the situation around. And within her voice, there was no criticism at all. Her tone showed that she was timid and wronged. The people around them were all people invited by Xiao Yarrow Wang. They are very able people who lived in seclusion. Dongling was able to understand the situation quickly and took advantage of the surrounding situation. She had twisted the greatest benefits for herself, smart. There is this saying that blood is thicker than water. However, to have this kind of sister, she is sure unlucky. It wasn't known who had said that, but Xiao Yarrow Wang's expression had turned worse. He coldly said, "Is the boat ready?" Replying to Wang Ye, "The boat is ready," a servant had said as he rushed over. Xiao Yarrow Wang was too lazy to even look at Xiao Yun. He waved his hand, "Send second young Miss Xiao back." "Wang Ye, I really didn't mean to do it." Xiao Yun really wanted to say more. But with the disgust and disdaining look she was getting from the numerous experts, she felt like she had become the target of criticism from others. She felt as if she just say a wrong word, she'll be killed by them and thrown into the blue lake. Xiao Yarrow Wang walked forward to help Huang Bei Yu up. He softly asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm okay. Thank you Wang Ye for your concern," she had quietly said. Then she untied her cloak and gave it to Dongling. "Dongling, put it on my sister." "Yes." Dongling brought the cloak over. "Second young miss, the weather is really cold. Put it on." The things that Huang Bei Yu give her, how could Xiao Yun accept it? But right now she can't shed her pretense. So she forced herself to laugh and said, "It's okay. Third sister isn't in good health. It's best if third sister wears it. Second sister's health is very good." Even in this state, she doesn't forget to mock Huang Bei Yu's sickly body. Huang Bei Yu raised her head. Her pitch-black eyes were like the morning stars that appear in the horizon. Resplendent and blurred, she looked at Xiao Yun's face. Her voice was soft but flat. "Second sister has a healthy body, so I won't worry. But second sister had fallen into the water and isn't properly dressed. It's okay here, but once you get to the coast, there will be a lot of people. People will talk about how the young missus from Princess Zhong's prefecture doesn't know any etiquette." Xiao Yun was frozen to the point where her face had become blue. Suddenly, her face became red. She had just remembered that the clothes she was wearing were what she would wear at a lady's chamber. She was only wearing an unlined single garment, and because she had fallen into the water, the garment stuck to her skin. The thin single layer of the garment was light and transparent. It stuck to her skin, outlining her fine curves. The red undergarment that she wore inside was faintly discernible. The people who were standing there were all men. She's an unmarried woman, yet she was losing face in front of numerous people without knowing it. She was careless and doesn't understand the etiquette. She was no different from a woman from the brothel. 1. In the Raws, it was concubine Qin. But I think the author made a typo because Xiao Yun isn't really related to concubine Qin. So I changed concubine Qin to concubine Shui. The methods of refining pills. 18. Immediately, in addition to the anger in their gaze, the gaze of the surrounding people was also filled with contempt towards Xiao Yun. Xiao Yun quickly took the cloak that Dong Ling had brought over. She rapidly put it on herself, wrapping her entire body up. The bodyguards who had no self-restraint had already lowered their heads and started laughing. Xiao Yun only thought that today was the most humiliating day of her entire life. And she had lost her dignity in front of Xiao Yarrow Wang, the person she likes. She wants to find a crack in the ground and crawl inside. 2 lines of tears rolled down her cheeks. She was too embarrassed to continue to stay on the boat. She had her head down. While sobbing, she followed Xiao Yarrow Wang's servant onto the small boat and left. Huang Beiyu sneered coldly in her heart. Xiao Yun, you want to fight with me? You're still too tender. From today onwards, another frivolous, wanton, and ruined woman would appear in Linhuai City. However, Xiao Yun didn't have the luck that concubine Qin had that year. Concubine Qin was able to meet the lenient and generous Princess Zhong. Princess Zhong had allowed concubine Qin into the prefecture as a concubine. Xiao Yun was only an unmarried 16 years old. In this lifetime, she probably doesn't have any place in the future with the other main wives from prominent families. After the matter regarding Xiao Yun, the people that were invited here by Xiao Yarrow Wang were no longer in the mood for the pill event. One after another, they took their leave. Princess Beiyu. Before leaving, a thin but bright old man walked in front of Huang Beiyu. He humbly cupped one fist in the other hand and said, "The daughter that Princess Zhong had taught, you understand the etiquette very well." Princess didn't put Princess Zhong's reputation to shame. This old man is very gratified. Huang Beiyu stared at him blankly. In her memory, there were no memories of him. The old man laughed with a ha-ha. Of course Princess doesn't recognize this old man. I had met Princess Zhong before she was married. Sir, Beiyu was rude. Huang Beiyu, immediately as the identity of a junior, bowed to him. She is usually a proud person, but when it comes to her elders, especially a kind and loving elder, she is usually very respectful towards them. Furthermore, his words had praised Princess Zhong. Towards such a person, she needs to be very respectful to him. Hence, the memory of Princess Zhong won't be flawed in his heart because of her. The old man stroked the short beard on his chin and laughed. Good. Today this old man has seen Princess Beiyu. This old man have finally resolved my desire. That year I was too busy. I wanted to give Princess Zhong a gift. But I had to deal with a lot of matters, so it kept getting delayed until she had passed away. I was still unable to send the gift. This old man had felt great regret these past years. Sir, please don't say that. My mother must have felt that it was very fortunate of her to have met you. Huang Beiyu said with a smile. The old man smiled with relief, being able to hear the princess say it like this. This old man is also very fortunate. Since I'm unable to give this gift to Princess Zhong, then I'll give it to you. Think of it as resolving one of this old man's wish. Saying up to this, he turned his hand over. From his high-grade purple gemmed space ring, he took out a scroll. With a smile, he gave it to Huang Beiyu. Huang Beiyu didn't dare to refuse as she quickly received it from him. Thank you, sir. When an elder gives his junior something, it wouldn't be smart to refuse. Ha ha ha, good child. I hope to see you again. The old man saw that she was well-mannered. He felt even more gratified. He nodded his head. His body floated on top of the lake. As he floated more, he slowly disappeared into the distance. The methods of refining pills. 19. As Huang Beiyu looked, she was stunned. His martial arts was so confident and cool. Dong Ling was also at a loss for words. "Young miss, is that man an immortal? A lonely medicine saint and a wanderer, he's no different from an immortal." Xiao Yarrow Wang smiled as he walked up. He looked at the scroll in Huang Beiyu's hand. A hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. 100 Ways of Refinement scroll? Huang Beiyu held up the scroll. She doesn't know what it is. But looking from the expression of Xiao Yarrow Wang, it should be a good item. "Little girl, you're in luck." Xiao Yarrow Wang used his folded fan and lightly tapped her head. His movement showed how much he's pampering her. "Little girl." Huang Beiyu's head was full of black lines. How long had it been since someone had called her that? "What is this 100 Ways of Refinement scroll?" Huang Beiyu lifted up the scroll. On the golden scroll, there was a vitality restriction around it. When she put her finger on it, the restriction was lifted. It seemed that the medicine saint had set the restriction so that by only using her vitality, the restriction would be lifted. This 100 Ways of Refinement scroll contains all of the medicine saint's knowledge. He never had a disciple, so there would be no successors to his knowledge. Xiao Yarrow Wang slowly fanned himself using his fan. There was no envious expression on his face as he had slowly said that. That year, he had met Princess Zhong. He had seen that she was well-mannered and talented. So he had wanted to take her in as his disciple. But later on, many things had happened. Thus, it was dragged on unsuccessfully until Princess Zhong's death. He was full of regret when that had happened. Huang Beiyu quietly listened. These things weren't in Huang Beiyu's memory. She didn't know that besides Princess Zhong's respectable status and outstanding morality and conduct, she has the talent for a refining pharmacist. Even the medicine saint wanted her as his disciple. A strong sense of pride rose in her heart. But at the same time, she inwardly regrets and wonders why someone as outstanding as Princess Zhong would marry someone like Xiao Yuan Cheng, who is a useless weakling as well as an impertinent man. She doesn't believe that Princess Zhong would love someone like Xiao Yuan Cheng. Was there an unspeakable reason? Huang Beiyu looked at the 100 Ways of Refinement scroll and a faint light flashed by her face. Why did the medicine saint give me the 100 Ways of Refinement scroll? Before he didn't say that he would take her in as a disciple, he only said that he's gifting this to her. It was his first time meeting her and yet he's giving her such a big gift. Huang Beiyu felt that she didn't receive him well enough. Xiao Yarrow Wang knew the hesitation in her heart. As a result, with a consoling smile, he said, "Rest assured. The medicine saint didn't say that he'll take you in as his disciple, so you don't have to worry over the weight of the gift. Just think of it as a gift from him." After hearing him say that, the pressure in her heart had become a lot smaller. If it was someone like the medicine saint had asked her to become his disciple, she wouldn't have acted the same way she did to the strange man from before. She wouldn't have refused till she's dead. The medicine saint had only given her the 100 Ways of Refinement scroll as a gift. It could be seen that the old man didn't want to give her too much pressure. Because of that, she admires the medicine saint's character even more. She secretly vowed that she would meticulously study the 100 Ways of Refinement scroll so that she won't make him lose face. The people that Xiao Yarrow Wang had invited had all left. The remaining few people on the ship didn't have anything to do. So Xiao Yarrow Wang ordered the servants to prepare a meal. The few people sat around the table, listening to the rain outside the window. The scenery was hazy. They drank and chatted merrily. With people like Luo Luo and Xiao Yarrow Wang present, they had a great time as they ate their meal. The methods of refining pills, 20. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, it was already afternoon. The clouds tinged with sunset hues in the horizon which reflected a golden layer of light across the lake. After the rain had stopped, golden rays of light floated on the surface of the lake. The scene was charming and gentle. Huang Beiyu walked out onto the deck of the ship to take a breath of fresh air. However, she accidentally saw Feng Lianyi leaning on the railing of the ship. He was looking at the lake, lost in his own thoughts. Tiny specks of golden light sprinkled on his unusual pair of purple eyes, slowly making it unusually bewitching and enchanting. When he had heard footsteps, Feng Lianyi slightly turned around. His beautiful eyes looked at her as he lightly smiled. That Ivaldor's appearance would definitely make people lose their spirit. Huang Bei Yu walked over without an expression. She stood next to the ship's railing. She was several steps away from him. The meaning of the distance between them was very clear. The meaning was, I'm not familiar with you. Feng Lian Yi pretended that he couldn't see her deliberate alienation from him. Leaving the place he was at, he walked towards her with a smile. Huang Bei Yu coldly raised her eyes, her gaze swept across him. That gaze was like a sharp blade. Feng Lian Yi immediately stopped his steps. If he continued to be insensitive, it would be boring. He slightly wrinkled his handsome brows. He could only, once again, lean on the railing of the ship. With only one hand supporting his body, he said, "The princess seems to be taking a lot of precautions against me." "I must," Huang Bei Yu faintly said. With just one word, she was able to take away the courage of the people that wanted to talk to her. Feng Lian Yi helplessly smiled. He's not someone who is easily defeated. So he faintly smiled and asked, "Why?" "You're not a good person," Huang Bei Yu said it directly. There was no one on the deck beside them, so she wasn't afraid of people overhearing them. "Just because I stole the lotus flame furnace from you?" Her cold and indifferent gaze swept across the Ivaldor's face. Her eyes were getting colder and colder. "From the first time I saw you, I knew you weren't a good person." With this, Feng Lian Yi was completely speechless. So when the first time they had met, she already classified him as a bad person. That day he just coincidentally happened to be there. He just so happened to saw her snapped the neck of the servant. He also just so happened to overhear her threaten that servant girl. He didn't do it intentionally. That little girl really is really good at holding a grudge. For some people, you need to slowly know them better to know whether they're good or bad. You can't just decide that with just a glance. He wanted to redeem his bad image in her heart. Huang Bei Yu coldly said, "I can usually see someone's character very clearly. Good people are just good people. Bad people are just bad people." With no way out of the situation, Feng Lian Yi laughed. It seemed that there was nothing he could do at the moment to establish a good image of himself in her heart. "Then when you're working with bad people, aren't you scared of asking a tiger for its skin?" he asked with a smile. The corners of Huang Bei Yu's mouth was slightly raised. A trace of an unyielding smile bloomed. A silk of coldness flashed by her clear eyes. The coldness didn't match her age. "You are a tiger. I'm a wolf. A fight between the wolf and tiger, who knows who'll win and who'll lose?" He really wanted to clap his hands and praise her. Her words were extremely marvelous, spicy, unwavering, and confident. He really appreciates it. "Okay then. Let's see the battle between the wolf and the tiger. Let's see who'll be the winner at the end." Huang Bei Yu glanced at him. Her eyes didn't even twitch. She coldly snorted and turned around and walked further away to feel the breeze. Feng Lian Yi looked at her petite yet straight back. Looking at her fragile body, how could she have such a strong heart within it? The difference between cloud and mud. 1. Bei Yu dynasty. After returning to Flowing Cloud's pavilion, Liu Yu excitedly took out the 100 Ways of Refinement scroll to study. The calligraphy on top of it was simple and unadorned. With just a glance, the scroll gave off a simple yet heavy feeling. It was brimming with power. Dong Ling increased the brightness of the light to the highest. She didn't dare to disturb her in the room, so she went to the outer room to sew clothes. Once Huang Bei Yu had sat down, she had sat there for the entire night. She didn't even rest her eyes. She looked at all the words that were written on the scroll and only felt that her warm blood was pumping quickly in her chest. This is the best method of refining in this world. The scroll contained information about refining and refining tools, which she had never understood much about them before. But now, with the 100 Ways of Refinement scroll, the things she didn't understand before, she now understand them all. She was already smart. While she read, she was silently calculating and connecting everything in her mind. She didn't feel sleepy at all. The more she read, the more she felt at peace. She was itching to experiment refining again. It just so happened that the purple gold furnace that Ngwa Gong had gifted her wasn't used yet. The herbs she had bought before was still in her space ring. She could just take them out and experiment with them. Just as she was thinking about taking out the purple gold furnace, the door in her courtyard was kicked down by someone. In her eyes, killing intent flashed by. She put away the 100 Ways of Refinement scroll, got up and went outside. Dong Ling had already opened the door. She only saw concubine Shui walking in with a few strong guards and maids. Xiao Yun had also followed them in. When Xiao Yun saw her, hatred and bitter resentment immediately appeared on her face. "What is the concubine doing?" Dong Ling asked as she walked to the middle of the courtyard. With one hand, she blocked the group of people. Huang Beiyu was about to tell Dong Ling to come back when concubine Shui raised her hand and slapped Dong Ling. Dong Ling immediately fell down and her face became swollen. "You lowly thing! Who allowed you to block my path?" Concubine Shui shouted loudly. Bang! A flower vase flew over from the door, hitting concubine Shui's head. Concubine Shui let out a miserable shriek. Fresh blood flowed down from her forehead as she fell onto the floor. Concubine Shui getting hit, mother! Xiao Yun screamed. After that, she lifted her head in fury and glared at Huang Beiyu. "Huang Beiyu, are you tired of living?" "The people who are tired of living is you. Dong Ling is my maid. Who allowed you to hit her?" Huang Beiyu's cold gaze swept across them. Her manner was imposing and very serious. Xiao Yun, without any reason, began to tremble. If concubine Shui didn't hit Dong Ling, she could have endured it. But she just doesn't like it when other people bully her people. Xiao Yun couldn't endure this anger. She opened her mouth and the ice feather immediately appeared on her hand. The cold air was threatening. The entire courtyard immediately became cold. A sinister expression flashed on her face. She maliciously said, "It seems that you're getting more and more daring. If I don't teach you a lesson, then you will no longer know what the rules are." Huang Beiyu coldly stared at her. Her eyes were full of irony. "Second miss." Dong Ling covered her face, got up from the ground, and wiped away the tiny stream of blood on the corner of her mouth. She slowly walked next to Huang Beiyu and stood on the stone steps. Dong Ling looked down at them. "My young miss was personally bestowed the title of Princess Beiyu by the Emperor. If you guys dare to hurt her, then it means that you are looking down on the Emperor." Xiao Yun wanted to talk, but she was grabbed by concubine Shui. The maids were busy cleaning the bloodstain on concubine Shui's forehead. Concubine Shui coldly laughed. "I didn't see you for one day and the third miss had changed a lot, even I don't recognize you." The difference between cloud and mud, too. Huang Beiyu lightly raised the corners of her mouth into a smile. "Concubine Shui is joking. Where has Beiyu changed?" "It's clearly because concubine Shui's eyes had become dull." "Ah, it is because my eyes had become dull. For so many years, I didn't see that third miss has such bravery." Concubine Shui's anger turned into laughter. For the first time, she truly looked at Huang Beiyu, who was standing on the flight of steps. She had never noticed that this little girl who was too weak to stand up to the wind would actually have this kind of noble and fierce temperament. "You're flattering me," Huang Beiyu said with a faint smile. She wasn't arrogant or impatient as she said. Beiyu's character was inherited from mother. It's the so-called saying, like mother, like daughter. Isn't that right, concubine Shui? Saying up to here, she looked at Xiao Yun, who was spitting with anger. Huang Beiyu cynically raised the corners of her lips. Dong Ling, this little girl, followed suit with a poochie, sound and laughed. Like mother, like daughter. To concubine Shui and Xiao Yun, that sentence was completely mocking them. It reminded them of the humiliation that Xiao Yun had faced on Xiao Yarrow Wang's ship. Concubine Shui and Xiao Yun's face had all become red. Good news doesn't spread, but bad news would spread thousands of miles. The deeds that Xiao Yun had done, it had spread all over the streets of Linhuai City. This formerly arrogant and talented summoner girl had become an object of ridicule in everyone's eyes. Before she was arrogant and annoying, now so many people loathe her. In the morning, Xiao Yun had gone out. But she had fled home under the numerous eye of contempt. Her face was pale white. Once she had entered Bai Shui courtyard, she threw herself on concubine Shui's embrace and cried loudly without end. Since she had grown up in the eyes of envy and jealousy from other people. She's a genius. She's Nanyi country's youngest female summoner. When she was just 16 years old, she was already a 3-star summoner. She was also able to summon out a rank 4 spirit beast of ice attribute, Snowcat. At that time, how well regarded was she? The entire city was raining flowers for her. Whenever she went out, eyes filled with envy, worship, and adoration followed her. She had never experienced this kind of scorn and ridicule. It seemed as if everyone in the world looked down on her. Those people were secretly talking about how she's a woman who is unrestrained, frivolous, and doesn't understand etiquette. She clearly isn't. She had always kept herself clean. She had learned from the mistakes of concubine Qin. Since little, concubine Shui had taught her to properly treasure her reputation. They had always looked down on concubine Qin. That was because she had a disgraceful history from the past. But now, all these disgraceful history were all added to Xiao Yun now. When Xiao Yun had recalled all of that, she was so angry that her whole body was shaking. She stood up and pointed the ice feather in her hand at Huang Beiyu. Stop talking nonsense. If that day you didn't frame me, would I have to endure all this shame? Today I have come to settle this debt with you. I framed you. Huang Beiyu lightly laughed. There were so many people present that day when you had pushed me. What's more, you had pushed me in front of everyone. You had also dressed like that. If it wasn't out of the kindness of my heart to let Dongling give you my cloak to cover yourself, then I'm afraid that even more people would have laughed at you. What you're saying is pleasant to hear, but I didn't push you at all. You pretended to fall and made everyone believe you. That's why I was humiliated. Huang Beiyu glanced at her with contempt and coldly sneered in front of them. Dongling continued on Huang Beiyu's words, "Second miss, you can't say that. That day there were so many experts present. Whether you had pushed her or not, a regular person wouldn't be able to tell. But do you think that those experts wouldn't be able to tell?" Dongling's quick-witted eyes lightly swept across Xiao Yun's face that had turned purple due to anger as she continued to sneer. 1. Poochie, sound of giggling. The difference between cloud and mud. 3. Dongling's quick-witted eyes lightly swept across Xiao Yun's face. Xiao Yun's face had turned purple due to anger as Dongling continued to sneer. What's more, the second miss's reputation in Linhuai City is great. Also, the second miss has the title of a genius. In contrast, my young miss is an unknown sickly person. How could those people believe my young miss instead of the second miss? Dongling's clever and eloquent words would kill people. Xiao Yun choked, because of swallowing the wrong way, and was unable to even say one word. Her face was blushing a deep red. What Dongling had said made sense. That day there were many experts present. It's reasonable to say that it would be impossible for those experts to not see that Huang Beiyu had pretended to be pushed. But then why did those people not believe her? Could it be that she had really accidentally pushed Huang Beiyu? With this, even Xiao Yun is doubting herself. She had turned around and glanced at her mother, not daring to say anything more. Concubine Shui looked at the pair of master and servant. One after another they used their elegant and clever words, making the mother and daughter pair unable to fight back. There was a fire burning in her heart. She already secretly had killing intentions towards Huang Beiyu. Anyways, Princess Zhong's prefecture was already surrounded by the people from Nguogan's prefecture. It would be extremely easy if they kill Huang Beiyu and shift the blame on Nguogong's people. She had never felt this way before, but she feels that if she continued to allow Huang Beiyu to live, she would be a disaster in the future. Huang Beiyu coldly looked at the concubine Shui's changing expression combined with the malicious light that flashed through her eyes. Huang Beiyu could easily understand concubine Shui's intentions. You want to kill someone and blame it on someone else? What's scary about dying? The crucial part is how one dies and whose hand they died at. It's also important as to reason that they had died for. It was merely concubine Shui and Xiao Yun. How are they even qualified to kill her? She'll make them unable to kill her and instead, make them beg her to live. Huang Bei Yu already had a plan. She raised her head and looked at concubine Shui, who was secretly giving a meaningful look at the bodyguard that had followed her here. Suddenly, she coldly humphed and slowly began to talk. Concubine Shui, that day second sister, had told everyone about concubine Qin's disgraceful history during Princess Hongling's birthday feast. Now, they're harboring hard feelings towards you. Now that something like this had happened to second sister, they have something that could be used against you. Concubine Qin wants to make Xiao Yun's reputation like hers, ruined for a lifetime. My Yuna had become like this all due to you. Now you're actually kind enough to warn me. Huang Bei, you don't forget, it was you who incited us to ruin her reputation. If she knew that, what do you think she'll do to you? That Qin slut's means of doing things is even fiercer than mine. Concubine Shui is naturally not stupid. Huang Bei Yu and she are two grasshoppers on the same boat. If something happens to her, then she won't let Huang Bei Yu live well. Huang Bei Yu tilted her head while she listened to her. Suddenly, she shook her head and softly sighed. Concubine Shui, are you really stupid or are you faking it? You said that I had incited you to ruin concubine Qin's reputation. Do you have any evidence? Concubine Shui and Xiao Yun simultaneously stared blankly at her. Evidence? The words that were spoken at that time, only concubine Shui and her maid had heard it. There was no one else present at that time to testify that it had really happened. Also, at that time she thought that Huang Bei Yu was a weak and incompetent fool. So she didn't think about keeping any evidence at all. Now that she thought about it, she had fallen into this little girl's trap. She had stood in the back, provoking them. Concubine Shui had thought that she had the support of the Empress Dowager and the Emperor, so she didn't fear anything. She had used all her courage and fought with concubine Qin. Now that she thought about it, cold sweat had overflowed. The difference between cloud and mud. 4. Now that she thought about it, cold sweat had overflowed. Once Prime Minister Qi suddenly reminisces about his father and daughter relationship with concubine Qin, then the consequences would be unthinkable once he finds out that she's the one who had ruined concubine Qin's reputation and disgraced the Prime Minister's prefecture. You ruthless little girl. Concubine Shui suddenly lets out a heart-tearing and lung-splitting shriek. How could she not think of that? This waste actually had set such a big trap and made her jump into it. This was basically giving her a painful slap on her face. It made all her arrogance and confidence in herself disappeared. How could she be defeated by a little girl who was a waste since she was young? Ruthless. Has concubine Shui ever heard of a common saying, the mouth of the snake and the bee's stinger are all venomous, yet it's not as venomous as a woman's heart? Huang Bei Yu mockingly sneered at them. She is ruthless? Then what about concubine Shui, who had slowly fed her poison for so many years? This woman is really living in her own world. She's almost crazy. She had causally scolded and yelled at other people. Did she ever think about what kind of trash she is? What qualifications does she have to yell at her? The things she had done today was merely a tiny bit of retribution of all the pains that Huang Bei Yu had suffered for so many years. This is only the beginning. A light suddenly flashes by concubine Shui's eyes as she had calmed down from her crazy state. She wiped the bloodstain on her forehead and fixed her messy hair. Her makeup was already ruined. Her middle-aged but still attractive face had become sinister and disgusting. A woman's heart is the most venomous. Well said, concubine Shui coldly said, even a little bit of kindness towards your enemy is the worst cruelty to yourself. Huang Bei Yu's cold eyes slowly swept across the bodyguards at concubine Shui's side. Their attractive and graceful face was calm and collected. She coldly swung her sleeve as she turned around to go into the house. As she had slowly walked, she coldly said, I advise you to become smarter. If I am dead, what kind of ability do you have to fight against concubine Qin and the Prime Minister's prefecture? After she had finished, she didn't care what kind of reaction concubine Shui would have as she went inside her room. Dong Ling stood on the porch, one side of her cheek was red and swollen. But when she raised her head and looked down at those people, she really looked proud. Concubine Shui and second miss, as long as Princess Bei Yu is in this prefecture, Don't even talk about the Prime Minister's prefecture. Even Gong's prefecture doesn't dare to do anything. Do you really want to destroy this big mountain? Dongling's smile was a little smug as she looked at concubine Shui and Xiao Yun, who was fuming with rage between gritted teeth. Dongling coldly glanced at them. Talking to concubine Shui and Xiao Yun, these kinds of people, is just wasting your saliva. To tell you the truth, if my young miss is no longer here, the people from Gong's prefecture would have exterminated the entire Xiao family. Whose spotlight had you guys been living on up till now? Why don't you guys even think about it? As she had said that, she looked at Xiao Yun. Her words weren't one bit forgiving. Also, second miss. The you right now can't be compared to the you in the past. If you go outside, people will ridicule you. Now our Princess Zhong's prefecture's face will be unrelated to you. You're the same type of person as concubine Qin. It's best if you don't leave the prefecture too often so you'll lose less face. Xiao Yun had relied on force to bully others just because of the fact that she's a genius. But Dongling doesn't feel like there's anything wrong with relying on force to bully others. She's relying on her young miss right now to bully Xiao Yun and concubine Shui. She's very content. When she had finished talking, she also had entered the room. She closed the door confidently and at ease. She didn't care at all as to how ugly concubine Shui and Xiao Yun's expressions were. The difference between cloud and mud. 5. Mother, that slut Xiao Yun was angry to the point that she had almost crushed her silver teeth. She was itching to rush up and peel off Dongling's skin, drink her blood, and eat her meat. Concubine Shui's chest pounded for a few times. People who have a profound mind is able to endure it. She heavily patted Xiao Yun's hand and fiercely said, "She won't be arrogant for long." Xiao Yun knew that concubine Shui had poisoned Huang Beiyu. Thus, when she thinks about how Huang Beiyu's body was already corroded with poison right now, Xiao Yun was somewhat comforted. Her body will be merely an empty vessel soon. According to the doses that concubine Shui had given to Huang Beiyu, in less than half a year, Huang Beiyu would be the same as Princess Zhong. It's merely half a year. They'll wait for Huang Beiyu to die and then take care of that clever and eloquent maid. Humph. She must tear her mouth apart and pull her teeth out one by one. Mother. Xiao Yun helped concubine Shui pack to their pavilion. She told the bodyguards and the maids to stand away from them, making them unable to hear their conversation. What should we do now? How come, Huang Beiyu, that little girl had suddenly changed so much? Does she know? Impossible. Concubine Shui raised her hand to stop Xiao Yun from guessing. I've been very cautious about this matter. All these years, only you and I know of the matter. Even a highly skilled doctor wouldn't be able to figure it out. Could it be that yesterday, Xiao Yarrow Wang had figured it out? The inner flame of worry inside her heart was like a flame that was burning her. Concubine Shui was stunned for a second but immediately shook her head. No, if Xiao Yarrow Wang had figured it out, then he definitely won't let us go. Xiao Yun's beautiful and alluring face was suddenly filled with deep-rooted hatred. Huang Beiyu, that cheap little girl. Poisoning her to death is letting her off lightly. She had made me become so humiliated in front of Xiao Yarrow Wang. After thinking for a bit, concubine Shui said, listening to Huang Beiyu's tone today, it seems that she's standing on the same line as us. As long as we use her, there'll be chances where you can get close to Xiao Yarrow Wang. Mother. Xiao Yun suddenly raised the pitch of her voice. Are you telling me that I still need to be nice to that cheap little girl? Yuna concubine Shui glared at her. This little girl has recently been unable to remain calm. Xiao Yun felt like she's wronged as she said, she caused me such harm. I'm itching to kill her. I can't be patient and accommodating to her. If you're unable to bear it, then you'll ruin the big plan. The things that had happened yesterday already had happened. If you want Xiao Yarrow Wang to have a good impression of you in his heart, then curry favor with your third sister. But, concubine Shui said, Yun with your beauty, talent, and ability you're better than Huang Beiyu by 10,000 times. Xiao Yarrow Wang would naturally find your good points. Think about marrying him the future and think about the essence cleansing pill. What can you not endure? As Xiao Yun listened to concubine Shui's words, she thought her reasoning in her heart. Yes, her beauty, talent, and ability are all above Huang Beiyu. Besides Huang Beiyu's status as the daughter of the main wife, how can she compare to her? She is a 3-star summoner. But Huang Beiyu, on the other hand, can't even condense her vitality. What's more, she's also a sick person. The distance between them is like the difference between cloud and mud. When she marries Xiao Yarrow Wang in the future and obtain the essence cleansing pill, then Huang Beiyu can no longer catch up to her. Mother, what you said is right. How can that Huang Beiyu be compared to me? Humph. I'll endure it now, and in the future, I'll repay the debt to her. This is my good daughter. Concubine Shui said as she happily patted her hand. The difference between cloud and mud. 6. This is mother's good daughter. Concubine Shui patted her hand, gratified. She smiled. When you become the Xiao Yarrow Wang's Wangfei, so what if Concubine Qin has the support of the Prime Minister's prefecture? When the time comes, we don't need to rely on Huang Beiyu, that smelly girl. We can torture her to death however we want. Mother and daughter thought as they wanted with great imagination. They had no idea the words that they had said were all heard by Huang Beiyu. Inside the room of the Flowing Clouds Pavilion, Huang Beiyu shook her head as she faintly smiled. What a great pair of outrageous mother and daughter. Not to mention the excessive delusion illness, they also have selective memory loss. Based on Xiao Yarrow Wang's status and position, how could Xiao Yun, who has a bad reputation, become his Wangfei? These two, mother and daughter, thought that based on beauty and wisdom along with that pitiful 3-star summoner strength could have let Xiao Yarrow Wang look at them differently. Don't indulge in fantasy. Who is Xiao Yarrow Wang? He had seen various beautiful women above Xiao Yun in beauty and wisdom. Where had Xiao Yun gotten the confidence that made her think Xiao Yarrow Wang will definitely fall for her? Young miss, what are you thinking that made you so happy? Dong Ling saw her face of happiness, as though she is in a lot of joy. So she happily asked as well. I am laughing that there is almost a Wangfei coming out from our prefecture. Can I not be ecstatic? Wangfei? Dong Ling blinked her eyes, not understanding. This small 3-star summoner dared to not even put me in their eyes. If she becomes Xiao Yarrow Wang's Wangfei, then how would that turn out in the future? Once Dong Ling had heard this, she immediately knew who Huang Beiyu spoke of. She covered her small mouth and giggled. The second young miss wants to be Xiao Yarrow Wang's Wangfei? This dream that she made might be too bizarre. Dong Ling curled her lips. Suddenly she thought of something and said, actually, I think that the way Xiao Yarrow Wang acted towards young miss, Huang Beiyu's faint eyes swept over. Dong Lin instantly stuck her tongue out and closed her mouth. Momentarily after, she smiled. In short, Xiao Yarrow Wang is very nice to young miss. To the second young miss he hadn't even spared a glance at her. No matter whether Xiao Yarrow Wang has intentions towards her or not, all of Xiao Yun's beautiful dreams, I will never let them come true. Huang Beiyu's face slowly became cold and indifferent. This pair of mother and daughter, she won't easily let them go. Right, only nightmares, no beautiful dreams. Dong Ling also determinedly announced. Dong Ling, you go out and keep a lookout for me. Don't let anyone disturb me. Huang Beiyu was prepared to follow the lonely medicine saints, 100 refines, ancient scrolls, to first experiment with refining. So during this period of time, no one was allowed to disturb her. Looking at her serious expression, Dong Ling knew what to do. She nodded her head, closed the door, and walked out. Huang Beiyu took out the purple flame furnace from the space ring as well as some materials. She placed them all on the ground and sat on a cushion with her legs crossed. She sorted each of the materials out. What she was preparing to refine was a type of low-grade healing drug, growth muscle pill. Growth muscle pill was popular between mercenaries and adventurers. It had the efficacy of quickly stopping the bleed of blood and aid to assemble the wound back together. The way to refine it was pretty simple and the materials were commonly seen, along with a cheap price. Normal refining pharmacists would refine this and actually refine this in large amounts in short amount of time. As long as they refined it out, these mercenaries and adventurers would definitely grab the pill crazily. She prepared the 5 types of attributes of materials, then slowly ignited a fire. She guided the flame into the purple flame furnace and placed a fire attribute, grass worm fruit, in there. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.